Hello, Motorrad World fans, and welcome to another episode of Talking MotoGP with myself, Rob Portman, and Paul Scott. I'm very pleased to say has rejoined me once again. Paul, since you missed us last week because you were riding your bicycle and doing all kinds of funny things, you'll notice that I've become a professional gamer.
I see so. Jeez, Rob, you're taking this very serious. I'm going to have to up my game completely. So just give me some heads up next time and I'll try and match you for like.
Now I've got my son playing his Fortnite in the background again. So this is going to just try and keep the conversation to MotoGP and not Fortnite. So Paul, great to have you back. Thank you so much. You've been doing all kinds of crazy things also on two wheels. Just with no motors involved.
Rob. I took on the challenge of the Absa Cape Epic, which is, for those who don't know, it's ridiculous. And for those who do know, it's equally as ridiculous. Other than that, life goes on. And I think it's time we got stuck into this MotoGP story.
Absolutely. A big shout out to my best mate in the entire world, Shez, and his partner for the Cape Epic, Franco, for completing the Cape Epic. It is. It's I'm not into bicycles, but I know it's that one event that just it's epic. I mean, it says it in the name. So well done for tackling that, and well done to Shez and them. So in pole position in our comments, Brian Ritchie, how's it, everyone? Interesting topics tonight. I don't know how true this is. Pedro is off to Ducati, and Alex will move to KTM in his place. Rumor I heard that Cressini is up for sale. Furman Aldeguer to VR46. So thank you, Brian. You're in pole position in comments tonight, and a lot of those talking points we will definitely get on today. Second place, Paolo Chiacchetti. Hello, hi everyone. So looking forward to the chat tonight. As for Sunday's race, all I can say is simply the best. Paolo, he was sensational, and we'll talk more about him later. Harvey Lowe is in third position, final step on the podium there. Hello all, and then we have Wayne Taylor. Evening everyone, Wayne Taylor. So KTM have gone and basically lost the one good thing they had with their bike, which was straight line speed. So now they have a slow bike that still can't turn. Just wonderful. It's going to be a great show talking about KTM, isn't it?
Wayne, why don't we call a spade eh?
Just laying it all out.
That's the comment, and just on that very quickly, Rob, which we'll dive into later. Last year or 2 years ago, having the fastest bike, I don't want to say by a mile, but consistently, to now being 2Ks faster than the Yamaha and slower than everything. What have they done?
I don't know. It's a big conversation tonight, because it was a terrible conversation they put on the weekend. I just want to get my glove on, because you'll see tonight's episode is sponsored by 5 Gloves. I've been wearing 5 Gloves for many, many years. I used to race with them towards the end of my career, and then I got them just before I left South Africa. I got sponsored by Powered by Autocycle Centre, the official importers and distributors, and a big thank you to them for sponsoring the show. So I just thought I'd show off my nice gloves. These, I've picked my nose, scratched my bum, ridden motorbikes, crashed motorbikes, and they're still like brand new. So big thank you to 5. Get down to your local Powered by Autocycle dealer and check out the great range they've got, or just get online, Powered by Autocycle Centre or poweredbyautocycle.co.za. So big thank you once again for supporting the show. In the comment section after Wayne, let's just carry on here. Gary Granger, we know Gary Granger, of course. Yeah, your good mate there. Sebastian Trump 681. Hi guys. Hope we chat about Darryn in the Daytona 200. Was nice seeing him enjoying it. So let's quickly touch upon that, Paul. I've tried every single avenue. I sent 10 pigeons out the other day with a message to Darryn to try and get him to do a live chat. I'm not winning with him. I think he's just cut himself off from the social media world and the rest of the world. So hopefully we'll get a chat with him soon. I've even asked his beautiful fiancée, and nothing's happened there. But it would be great to get a chat with Darryn, because his next race is only the end of April, to hear how his Daytona went. But raced in Daytona for the first time, literally climbed on the bike for the first time. No, he hasn't done any riding whatsoever. He's, surgery on the arm. Hopped on the bike, was in the top 3 in the practice and qualifying sessions, and then just missed the podium in 4th place. But a good first outing, and good to see Darryn kind of be competitive again. I know a lot of people will say, but it's Moto America, and he got beaten by a girl. And you look at the quality that's gone over to that Moto America championship and haven't been able to compete. For Daz to go out there first time out and do what he did just shows that the talent that he is. And let's hope that this is the environment that Daz can go really thrive on, because it did seem like the last couple of years, especially the MotoGP paddock, it wasn't Darryn's environment. He just couldn't be the Darryn he wanted to be.
Yeah, Rob, I agree with your sentiment. And, to go to the States, it's a different environment. Everything's new. The only thing that will be familiar to him is the language. Other than that, it's a completely new turned over a new leaf. And I was so impressed to see him running, as you say, consistently top 3. Then they had apparently a little bit of a fluff of one of their fuel stops, which resulted in him ending up 4th. But that's a fantastic result. As long as we see him at the sharp end of the field, we might have had a different opinion had he qualified 23rd and finished 20th.
Yes.
But he didn't. From the minute they got on the track, a track he's never ridden at before, he was in the top 3, top 4, and that's fantastic. So I think it bodes well for him. I agree with your sentiment. Maybe taking him out of that high pressure MotoGP environment, as well as the pressure of being Brad Binder's brother, because you got to factor that in. Now he's Darryn Binder in Moto America, and let's see. I think he's going to do exceptionally well. So kudos to him, and I was very pleased to see that.
Yeah, it was a great exercise. Mark Teal, good evening, Robin Paul. Greetings from myself and Liam. We're wanting to hear your viewpoint on the state of the track on Sunday. That's going to be a big talking point. Of course, we got Deep Sea R3F. We got John Fernandez 7908 on YouTube. We've also got, who's this? Leroy Barter 1447 on YouTube this weekend. Inexcusably bad. The facility still under construction. A sinkhole, the surface breaking up, raising serious safety concerns, causing major delays, yet Dorna determined to proceed. Why? One of the big talking points we'll get into in just a second, Leroy. So stick around, get yourself nice and comfortable, get your tea, your coffee, whatever you want to get, because we do have a lot to talk about. There's good, a lot of good things and a lot of bad things. El Camino, great to have you. Kevin Ferree, Robert Mackey, how you doing, my bud? Mani Duplessis on YouTube, Robert Ferreira on Facebook, Daryl Holmes on Facebook, Dean Lemon. Hi, everyone from Garden Route, Robrot 91, Mohammed, Shaikh, always great to have you, Mohammed, Gavin Geldenace, Jacques Claessens, Michael Maggot, and then the list goes on. We can see everyone in there. Clyde Matthews 6966. Hi, Uncle Rob and Paul. I can't deal how KTM have sacrificed their biggest weapon, top speed, for basically nix. It was so bad to watch 3 KTMs at the back, Acosta basically midfield. So yeah, we'll definitely jump into that. I think, Paul, the first place to really start is the topic of this Brazil GP. We spoke just before we came on air about the weekend, and I don't know about you, and I don't know about how everyone else felt in the comments. I think we probably share the same sentiments. I really battled to get to interact with this GP. It started on a bad foot with the weather on the Friday. Even before that, there were concerns with the weather. And I mean, a couple of months ago, there's just been nothing but drama leading up to it. It's never really looked like, I'm surprised it even went ahead, to be honest.
Yeah.
Then they go there, the weather, couldn't get into it. Then the sinkhole, and then the riders didn't look happy. I wasn't impressed with the layout. I think it was like a Scale Electrics track. It didn't kind of accommodate for good racing. It didn't really have good flowy parts. It didn't have overtaking parts. It really just didn't tick any boxes for me, other than the city in the background. The backdrop looked beautiful. The pit facilities look good. The crowd were amazing. The samba dancing. The Brazilians just have that vibe. Other than that, I really did battle connecting with this weekend, and I wouldn't be displeased if they took it off the calendar, to be honest.
Yeah, Rob, in all fairness, after the debacle of specifically the track and the track surface, surely Dorna have now got to look at this, or Liberty, and say, we can't afford this. Had somebody got seriously or critically injured, there would have been a big hoo-ha. Luckily, thankfully, that didn't happen. But, Brazil know that kind of weather is around there. So is it just a track surface that was badly prepared? We don't know those sort of things behind the scenes. But I feel it just didn't seem to have any flow to it. The riders, which you and I mentioned before we were on, it just looked like they kind of, once it got to that point where the track was falling apart, they were like, let's just get over and done with this weekend so we can head to America, where we probably a lot more comfortable. They know what to expect. They know how things work. So to me, it seemed very disjointed. Yeah, obviously with the delays, etc., that causes that. But you weren't like sitting in front of the TV saying, okay, let's get going now. It was almost like, well, are we going to get going? So puts a bit of a damper on it. I agree with you. Possibly what Dorna felt, they raced there, when was it last? 2004. MotoGP has progressed so much from then until now. That maybe they thought, in hindsight, 2004, the track was fine, the bikes will be, we're running 40 k's an hour faster than they were then. Everything is bigger, better, faster, and possibly it was just too much for that circuit. So I think that's part of the issue, that Dorna were living a little bit in the past, and maybe they've realized, okay, this sport has progressed, way more than Alex Barros winning on a twin-cylinder Honda to what it is now. And I think that did catch up with them a little bit.
I think the biggest slap in the face comes at literally just a couple of weeks before that, the announcement that Phillip Island, the iconic Phillip Island, the one that we all pencil off, you highlight in the calendar, you tell your wife and kids, Phillip Island weekend, you must go stay at a hotel because I'm watching Phillip Island. That's how it happens. Yeah. They take that off the calendar and they use the safety concerns, and we told them to upgrade the facilities, which we know Liberty is going to want the prestige of Formula One. So the Phillip Island doesn't really tick the box in terms of prestige and hospitality and whining and dining the suits and ties, which we couldn't care about. I couldn't care less about that. I understand there's money involved in politics. I want as a fan, I want to watch good quality racing at a racetrack I can identify with and connect with. Then they go to Brazil, which was clearly nowhere near ready enough to host a MotoGP race, certainly on track, with the surface coming up in the heat. Thank goodness they actually had the rain on the Friday, because if they had a dry day on the Friday, that track would never have lasted 2 days. Sunday wouldn't have even happened. So, hats off to everyone for making the weekend happen. But they did kind of throw the riders in a lot of danger. We've all seen the social media with Alex Rins with a broken finger, Toprak finding bits of track in his boots, and I mean it's just ridiculous. And it was a real highlight to MotoGP, to Dorna, to Liberty, whoever, to say, well, this is not how you run things. I mean, the riders, they've got to stick to somewhat of a script and can't really go past that script. So they've come out and, in the most politically correct way, said, this was a load of BS. But I think if you honestly ask a lot of riders, they'll say there's not a chance we're going back there unless they completely turn things around.
Rob, I think it becomes a moot point, because the riders, they do have their safety commissions and their riders committees. I think Liberty will call the shots. But I think if there's enough of a backlash, and I saw at one point they showed Loris Capirossi, and he was being very verbal with somebody. Clearly, we don't know what the conversation was. But one thing I feel in my heart, Capirossi will stand for the riders because he is the safety officer. He's raced. He knows the risks involved. I think if he, and I'd love to have known what that conversation was all about, because he might have just been saying, listen, guys, this is the pinnacle of motorcycle racing. This is unacceptable. I can't believe he was having a verbal conversation with someone saying, no, I think this is safe enough. Just shut up and put the Oaks on the track and let them race. So let's see what the outcome is, but they'll have to probably resurface, if not the whole track, certainly a large section of it. And which possibly Brazil might say, because they feel the event was successful, what did they have, 150,000 feet through the gates over the weekend? That to me is a successful event. So possibly they might say, okay, we'll do all the necessary, get it up to standard, and then we could see a better event next year. Won't change the track, though, which won't make the racing closer. Look, obviously next year, 850's new kettle of fish. But looking at what we saw this year, if it's the same track, regardless of the surface, the racing's not going to be much better.
Yeah, the layout's not very entertaining to me. Like I said, it's a scale electrics. You just hold the button and it just had no kind of, I couldn't connect with it. But, also decisions made are literally, and I know a lot of teams were complaining about it. Enea Bastianini coming out and saying, he was right at the back of the grid. So literally 2-3 minutes before the race is about to start, they were told, okay, we're reducing the race by 8 laps or whatever it was. And then you're sitting there with, you've prepped your bike for 31 laps. You've chosen this tire for 31 laps. You've set your electronics to 31 laps. You've done your whole game plan to 31 laps. And I understand, because of all the delays and the interruptions they had throughout the weekend, they probably didn't want to make the decision to say, right, we're going to delay the race by another 10, 15 minutes. But this is where common sense comes into me. I've always never liked them sitting on the grid for 20 minutes. It just it kills me. You've had a whole delayed Friday and Saturday, and then you still let them sit on the grid before a sprint race for 15 minutes so that cameras can get on. Cut all that nonsense out. Sunday they could have easily on the grid said, right, we're delaying this race by 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Okay, maybe there were other internal things that they were worried about, but to then go to the teams, and I know the VR46 team also came out and said, how can you literally tell us 5 minutes before we're going to start the race that you're cutting down 8 laps? Unacceptable. So a lot of bad errors made, a lot of bad organizing, as a lot of people say in the comments here. It's just not the way to go. Unfortunately, as Joan Fernandez says here, so should have been a better bet. Why aren't they racing in SA? The problem, John, comes down to obviously finances is the biggest thing. These circuits have to finance. They've got to propose to Dorna or now to Liberty and say, right, we would like to host this GP. From what I heard when I was doing my rounds in 2022 is the circuits have to fund up the money. So you've got to put up whatever it's going to be, 150, 200 million in Rand's case, 500,000, R1 billion Rand to host the event, and then hope you make your money back in TV coverage and ticket sales. And knowing Toby Fenter and those kind of guys, they're businessmen first and foremost before they're motorsport fans. And they're going to look at this and going, right, we're going to need at least 200, 250,000, 300,000 people to kind of just break even. Where are we going to accommodate those people at Kyalami? Kyalami is not equipped to handle 300,000, 250, 150,000 people realistically. And then you've got to deal with all these factors, if the track comes up and they've already got. So I understand the integral parts of hosting a MotoGP and these problems, but I don't know how all these problems were only found out over a race weekend. Surely these should have been looked at before the race weekend even happened.
Yeah, definitely. You also don't know what pull there is from various organizations within the Brazilian Federation or whoever it is that they can sway it to get the race, So there's a lot of, I think, behind the scenes stuff. But rightly what you said, Rob, first of all, I don't think Kyalami could handle what it needs to pull in 200,000 people. That we know there's single access in and out of Kyalami. It would be, they could change that, I think, but it would be a nightmare, as well as the fact, the money issue, they'd have to put up so much cash up front, and I don't know if that's going to happen. Realistically speaking, it would be fantastic for us to be able to go and watch MotoGP in South Africa, but realistically, I can't see it happening. I don't even think it's ever been looked at very seriously. I know they looked sort of seriously at Formula One, but that's now gone very quiet. Because I think someone said to them, okay, we're happy to come to South Africa. This is the size of the check you need to write. And as soon as that number comes out, I think people are like, oh, okay, nice idea, but. So let's see. But certainly going back to Brazil, maybe not the best choice, especially with the fact that we're losing a place like Phillip.
Absolutely. Michael Viljoen, is it Michael Viljoen? Yeah, he's got all the answers for us. Bring MotoGP to Midville. And I agree with him. It's a better surface, and that surface has been around for 150 years.
Exactly.
Okay, Paul, just quickly before we get into MotoGP, there's a couple of comments here about Ruché Moodley. Like this one, I am concerned about Ruché as well, especially that Cormac, his teammate, was at times 2 to 3 seconds faster than him. I think that's over elaborating it because it was a new circuit and everything. It was very start-stoppy. There's a lot of comments here about concerning Ruché Moodley and the concerns of his performances in these first 2 races. I must say, just hold on, my baby, I can't talk now. What's up? Okay, I'll come down now. Thank you, my angel. Okay. My daughter telling me supper's ready.
Oh, good. What's for supper?
Oh no, I don't know. Now I'm hungry. But I shared the same concerns, I must be honest, with Ruché this weekend. The one thing Brazil did have was it was a level playing field, right? No one's going there with data, all the riders. So in some ways you could kind of, get a balance of who is where, machine-wise and rider-wise. And Ruché and his team weren't at the races the whole weekend. Let's be honest, in the wet conditions. And I don't blame him. They would have probably looked at the forecast and gone, well, it's going to be sunny the rest of the weekend. Why go push in the rain conditions? Risk hurting yourself, crashing about, costing money. That I understand. But then he just never really kicked off in the dry either. Cormac had a massive crash. I think Ruché had a crash. Yes, I mean, there were crashes galore there. So it was concerning. The first 2 rounds have been concerning about Ruché, I must be honest. It's another guy that after we've got a couple of weeks break after COTA next weekend that I'll definitely get on top of and get him on a one-on-one chat and see what he says. Because what concerns me the most is we can all see the work he's putting in. He's doing the go-kart training. He's training with the Pedro Acostas. He's doing all that training. Something's not clicking, whether it's with the team, whether it's with the bike, whether he's too big for Moto3, whether he can't get along with the something's just not clicking there, because there's a much better rider that's been shown. But I do agree with some of the comments on the side of it is a cause for concern, because we've got Brad there. We don't know how much longer we've got Brad there. We've lost Darryn. Ruché is kind of like our glimmering hope of South African flag at the moment, and we don't want it to just fade away into Super Sport 600s or Moto America or something. We want Ruché to really give it a Moto3, Moto2, and potentially MotoGP.
Yeah, definitely, Rob. So look, I was also very disappointed, but we're 2 races into a 22 race series. We can't also keep making excuses. Not that I'm saying we are, but I think the true outcome will be from this coming weekend at COTA. He's raced there. He knows the circuit. From what I can remember last year, I think he finished 17th or 18th. So it's a circuit that he probably might feel a little bit more familiar with. But he needs to certainly, it's year 2. First and foremost, he needs to consistently try and be ahead of McCormack. And then he needs to start scoring points regularly, even if it is 13, 14, 15. What seems to happen with him, to me, he loses that toe in the first 3 or 4 laps. And then it's almost impossible to get back to that group that's running at the back of the point scoring points. And it's very difficult if you're on your own when they're in a slipstreaming bunch. So I think he needs to try and work on that, which obviously qualifying a row or 2 further up will help him. So let's hold thumbs and hope that America this weekend is a much better.
Nice comment here from our mate James for you, Paul. Paul, you're looking ripped like a township dog. Well done on your He's got away with words, hasn't he, old James? He can't just say, hey, Paul, you're looking good. Well done.
It's a polite way of saying, Paul, you look very skinny, eh?
That's a compliment when you call
that's squirrel.
Yeah, that's squirrel for you. So let's hope that Ruché, let's hope we'll get him on. First of all, let's hope for a better kind of, as you said, a better performance this weekend at COTA. He's done all the tracks now other than Brazil. He's done COTA last year, was kind of the learning point. So let's hope that he can just get a little bit of momentum and kick off, because something's just holding him back. My brother can hear Trey Kiddies quite a lot in the stream. Can you just quieten down a little bit, okay, boy? Thanks, boy. That's my brother telling me Nova was up here trying to get Dad's attention. I haven't played with her today, so she's like just desperate to play. And we're 2 hours behind you guys now, so I had to start at 6 here. So I didn't normally have my 7 p.m. So I'll make it up to her afterwards. Let's this comment here. These Spanish kids have a different kind of instinct or mindset and skill set. The way they are raised around racing is just far superior, I think. And it's a very good comment here on YouTube by Robrot91. So, they all got funny names on.
Okay, Rob, you carry on talking. I'm going to be 30 seconds. I'm going to get something I want to show you, and then I'll tell you why that happens.
Okay. Yeah, why I relate to that comment is because we again just saw Spanish riders on the podium. I think it was Moto3, Moto2, and then we had the odd Italian and the 2 Italians in MotoGP. But I got thinking that's why I brought up the comment of Ruché. Mark the Magnificent. There we go. Is that the Matt Oxley book?
Yeah. So I'm just highlighting. You read this, Rob, and he goes into, it's obviously a biography on Marc Marquez that he launched end of last year. But they tell you the junior system in Spain to get kids on motorcycles to race is unbelievable. It's probably like the academies we've got here for youngsters to play rugby. They, from 3 years old, these kids are groomed to be world champions. So when we compare it to South Africa, or probably anywhere besides Italy, I would imagine, you might have 12 kids in a race. In Spain, they're qualifying to get into the main race because there's so many of them. From 3 years old. It's unbelievable. So when guys say, yes, but there's so many Spanish, there's so many Italians. They've put systems in place, which we've discussed in the past. They've put systems in place to make it like that. So that's why it is where you've got one South African, 2 or 3 Aussies or New Zealanders, 2 guys from the UK, possibly. The rest of them are predominantly Spanish and Italian because they've been born and bred, just like the Italians coming to play rugby against us. Our South African kids are born in. So it's a different world altogether.
And that's kind of why I highlighted the point of, Ruché's family made the sacrifice to move to Spain. The kid trains with the Spain. He goes out of his way to train on the same kart circuits and that. But what's missing is that, as you said, that 10, 13, 14 years prior to that. Absolutely. They've been doing this for 14 years, not just the last 2-3 years. And you can see it with the results. Rossi's doing it with the Italians, and he got success with Bagnaia, and we're seeing with Bez now, and there's the Digis in that coming through. But the Spanish, when I do go to Spain for work, I'm lucky enough to go there, and our PR agency that we deal with in Barcelona, and it's just every second shop has got the Barcelona football kits or whatever. Then it's something to do with MotoGP, Marquez, or they just live, eat, and breathe it there, and they're supported in doing it, and that's why you are seeing the results there. And it's easy for us to say, but why can't South Africa? It's not a priority for South Africans. It's not a priority for most countries. For Italy and Spain, and we're just going to see more and more and more of them come through. It's great to see the likes of Colombia with Alonso coming through. A couple of Argentinian riders have come through now, but even Australian riders are kind of falling away. I've been watching a lot of old. I can't remember the channel on YouTube now, but there's a channel that's been playing old 500cc stuff. And if you look back in the day, I mean, it was Americans and Australians, Gardners, Dewans, Lawsons, Schwantz, Rainey, Doug Chandler.
Randy Mamola,
Alex Crivier was the first European to win a fight. And I was like, I didn't even think, you just can't even comprehend that the Spanish hadn't just dominated before. Alex Crivier was the first European to win a 500cc World Championship. And I was like, so, where's all that gone? Where's all of it gone? And it's simply a case of that Spain, and in particular Spain, but the European, Spain, Italy, and just up their game, and the others just kind of didn't, I suppose. And it's what we're seeing now, and we're going to continue seeing this dominance for a very, 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 very long time. If I look in that Moto3 category, again, 3 Spanish riders on the podium. Max Quiles is the next best thing under the Marquez wing. He's bound for success. The Ruchés, the Brads, and the Darryns all had to kind of pack their bags with mom and dad, with mom and dad's credit card and bills and poor currency, and off they go. That's it. There's support from us, South African supporters, and maybe the odd South African company here and there, and some donors on the inside, a little bit of money here and there. But there's no, other than that, that's where it ends. So how do you expect them to be on that level?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how it is, Rob.
And we're not going to see a change, Kevin George Kemp. Can MSA do more for youngsters racing? Yes, absolutely. I don't think they do anywhere near enough. They should be going out and finding the spot. The problem is it's left up to the youngsters and the parents to go find the sponsorship. If I look at KJ Monyanyane and, the Roberts brothers and Brad and Shez, and we'll sponsor your license. We'll buy your license to go race overseas. 2,000-3,000 rand, back in those days or whatever. Okay, that's great, thank you. But why aren't you going out to the Checkers 6060s and the Vodacoms and the big companies and saying, right, let's do a youth program? Neil Herron's been doing the academy back in South Africa for years, where Brad again went this year in his own time, and he goes to Red Star, and the kids camp out, and they do everything from fitness to riding, and but that's a Neil Herron out of his personal capacity going and doing that with no real support other than the NSFs that he was given and Red Star giving him the track. Why aren't the big companies getting involved in it? It's just not a top priority. If it was rugby, football, cricket, anything else, bike racing, Brad, thanks for what you're doing, but you must keep doing it out of your own pocket. So, and it's not going to change. It's I've been banging this drum. Motor Rider World was, and everything that I've done was created to give South African riders a platform to expose themselves, and that is Motor Riders World, and will from day one, and will always be the main goal for Motor Rider World, and that's what we do. But we do it out of, my brother takes his own time and effort to do that. I can't do it as much as I used to, unfortunately, anymore, because I've got full-time commitments. But then there's no one else taking the bull by the horns and doing that. And the Spanish just have proven that they just do it at the best level possible.
Yeah, and they reap in the rewards.
And they are reaping the rewards, exactly. So there's a lots of comments here about it. Olimoto, always our encyclopedia of MotoGP. Crivier was the first European to win it in 17 years when he was champion in 1999. Uccini was champion in 1982, as was all the orange. But there was that period. I know we had all the Uccinis and all the previous guys, but for a very long dominant period, it was Americans.
He was the first Spanish world champion of the 500cc.
Yes.
The first one, as you say, that's hard to believe.
That's
and now look, if it's not a Spaniard, it's an Italian. That's kind of how it is.
Exactly. Or an Indonesian, as we saw this past weekend with that youngster in Moto3, which was great to see. Okay, Paul, let's dive straight into MotoGP now. I'm going to go based on the riders and how they finished in Sunday's racing. We'll just touch upon them, starting off with Marco Bezzecchi. I think we've said a lot already this year and towards the end of last year when him and Aprilia really picked up their game. You weren't with me in the last episode, Paul, but I touched upon this look that Bezzecchi's got in his eye. He just sits in the pit, he sits on his bike, he sits in his pit box now, and he's just got this look. Even in the sprint race where a Bezzecchi used to be happy with a 4th, 5th, 6th, hell, even a 7th. He was kind of okay with it. Bezzecchi's not happy. Bezzecchi wants to just win and dominate races now. And he's got that look in his eye. He did it again on Sunday, unchallenged now for 108 laps, 105 laps in Sunday Grand Prix. Aprilia 4 in a row. It's just a stamp of dominance. The only thing I would kind of just poke him at as, yes, you've done well to go and challenge. You get out front and off you go. That seems to be the script. How is that going to be? And potentially we're going to see it this weekend at Kota. How's it going to be when you've got a Marc shoving it on your inside, when you've got a Pedro shoving it on your inside, when you've got those kind of distractions? Can't take out Jorge Martin after this weekend. We'll talk about him now. But so it was brilliant. Simply the best. Aprilia, absolutely magnificent. But I think there's still challenges that are going to come, but take nothing away from them. Please understand me. They are the reference in MotoGP at the moment.
Well, 100%, Rob. And if we go back a year to what we discussed a year ago, those first 3 or 4 races where he had now become the team leader because Martin was out, and it took him a while to find his feet. But once he found his feet, we said it last year and he's rolled it straight into this year. His confidence has got better and better and better. So the way they are managing him and allowing him to, I'm going to say, run the ship for the time being, it's just fallen. As we said, he was the number 2 rider. They were expecting him to just be on the bike and finish and do what you want to do. We'll look after Martin. Then circumstance fell into his lap. And let me tell you, this guy has grabbed this opportunity unbelievably. He's got that look of confidence. I don't want to say an arrogance, but it borderlines. He just looks like I belong. And that to me speaks. So that's how I found Martin to be 2 years ago when he won the championship. He can be very arrogant with Martin. We've discussed that. But he had that look about him that was, I belong here. I deserve this. I want this. Now, I think that's exactly where Bezzecchi is at the moment. He's confident in his team. He's confident in the bike. The bike is good. There's absolutely no doubt about that, because you look at, this weekend, Raul Fernandez was not great, but Ogura, great at the end of the race, which he's always been good at. And then obviously Martin. So 3 Aprilias running near the front. I agree with you. Let's see what happens. And there are going to be races where the Aprilia is not going to be as dominant and he's going to have to fight for his positions. Last year, he was a little bit fallible there and he fell off a couple of times. This year, we'll have to see. That air of confidence might just say to him, okay, I can do this. So, we said it about Alex Marquez last year. You have to show you belong here.
Yes.
I think Bezzecchi's proved that. 4 in a row. Hasn't been, I think he's led every lap since 2 races into the end of last season. Well done to him. So this weekend is going to be a challenge for him. But remember, 2 years ago, Maverick and, or 3 years ago, Maverick and Aleix finished first and second in America. So clearly the bike is going to be competitive. Other riders, maybe the Ducatis will be a bit better, but he's definitely, he's riding that wave and he's taking every advantage of it.
Yeah, I mean, all you can say is massive hats off to Bezzecchi and Aprilia, because you know, when he first signed for them, you know, I was one that kind of went, okay, you know, he's gonna be the wingman to Martin. You know, we all know how that played out, and then he's not mentally strong enough. And I watched that interview, I don't know if you saw it on MotoGP.com on their YouTube channel as well, where they had Lorenzo Rossi at the FIM Gala dinner, and they all sat around the table and they just got talking. And the one question was asked to Rossi's, like, you know, who's the man in the academy now? Like, who's really standing out?
Yeah.
And Pecco wasn't even in the conversation.
Yeah.
You know, he was like, yeah, Pecco's doing well, you know, he's got problems, but Bez is super focused at the moment. You know, people underestimate his touch and his feel and the way he can communicate and set up a bike. And, you know, Rossi wasn't surprised. He's like, Rossi was almost like, I've seen this change in Bez. I've seen this flick, the switch flick. He's 27 years old now, so that's a prime age. You know, it's really in the prime of your career. And when I saw that comment from Rossi, kind of dismissing everyone else in the academy, he didn't even mention anyone else. He kind of just went, Bez, you know, Bez rocks up to every training session on and off the bike, and he's just like, he's dialed in. And when I looked at that, and you look at this kind of performance again, and I just look at him sitting there, and, you know, he gives that smile and wave to the camera, but then it's just this laser, you know, it's like Rambo. You know, I just see Rambo when I look at the guy. And I look at how he took his 4th place, or finishing off the podium. Did he finish off the podium in the sprint race?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, I looked at how he treated that, and he was not happy.
Yeah,
it's unacceptable to not be on that podium now. Yeah. So very, very impressed by them. Absolutely impressed by them. His teammate Martin. There's a comment here that I want to touch upon. Yeah, Jorge Martin looking so much more at home on the bike. I was extremely impressed with Martin this past weekend. You know, I've always had that chip on my shoulder with Martin because of the arrogance you just spoken about, Paul. You know, we all know the talent there, but then everything that happened at Aprilia last year left a bad taste in my mouth. Yeah. Before that, he, you know, in the Phillip Island, when you were quick to blame the team, and there were a couple of things that I couldn't really take Martin on board. Then I looked at him this weekend, and I think we all forget the man has been through hell and back. We all forget what the guy's been through, you know, emotionally, physically, mentally. And to come back, also, you know, missed the early testing again, and you kind of thought, oh God, we go. We've seen this play out. Yeah. And as I said at the top of the show, this Brazil was always going to be a level playing field, and it was going to bring out kind of where bike and man and machine was. And for Martin to pull that off, his first main Grand Prix podium with Aprilia, challenging, was right there, didn't make any mistakes. We didn't see any kind of throwing the toys out the cot. We just saw this Martin going about his job. And I must say, I take my hat off to him. It was an absolutely phenomenal weekend. Showed why he's a former MotoGP world champion. Shown why he cannot be taken out of the running for being this year's MotoGP world champion. Great performance all round. Really hats off to him.
Yeah, definitely, Robin. You know, on the MotoGP, when the live feed, they give you the option to have your rider of the event, I would have put Martin as my rider of the event. Purely because, yes, he got smoked by his teammate, but that was expected. You know, where Martin, because of all the injuries and the lack of time on the bike and the whole Aprilia Jorge Martin vibe, you're kind of expecting him to run 6, 7, 8. But he's knuckled down. He's kind of put all of that behind him, and he's focused on what he has to do. So I thought rider of the race, to me, was him. My concern going forward now is going back to the drama between him and Aprilia and this Yamaha deal. What is going through his head? Has he signed a letter of intent? Because let's be quite honest, Rob, no matter how stupid you are, if you're on the Aprilia now, and you have an opportunity to stay there or go to Yamaha, I think it's not a very difficult decision. The problem he might have done was shooting his bolt a bit early last year, and now he's kind of stuck with whether it's a letter of intent or an actual contract that's been signed. Time will tell, but if that is the case, he at some point it's going to start to affect him, where he's going to start thinking, as these Yamahas are still running almost at the back of the field, and that's where I am next year. So I don't know. We'll have to see how this plays out, but that's for the future. As of right now, an absolutely stunning weekend by him. And like you say, he showed why he is a previous world champion. Put his head down, got the job done. There was an article on Crash.net saying, where they interviewed Massimo Rivolo, and he was saying his problem is going to be trying to juggle these two riders, because it was always supposed to be Martin as the number one. Now it's the other way around. But if Martin gets up to that level again, which is clearly right there, they're going to have a problem on their hands. I hope, and we discussed it last year, I hope they stick to Bez, because he's moved this project forward by X amount, where Martin wasn't there. So, but that's also going to, these are the intricacies that play into someone's favor and out of someone's favor. So it's going to be very interesting to watch that. Let's see what happens this weekend. If we've got those two running up front again, it's going to start causing drama at Aprilia. I'm almost sure of it.
And that was going to be my next comment, Paul, was about Martin and the Yamaha kind of tie-up. And as far as I know, it is a done deal. And what makes me lean towards that assumption is also the fact that Monster Energy are officially going to be pulling out of team sponsorship from next year. And I think that's also based on the fact that if you look at the current Monster Energy Yamaha team talk for next year, Martin and Razgatlioglu, two both Red Bull athletes. Ducati, they were going to lose their Ducati Monster Energy sponsorship because Marc is going to potentially bring Red Bull back there, with Pedro Acosta definitely going to Ducati next year. Made another Red Bull athlete. So Red Bull's just kind of snuck in its way and kind of guerrilla marketing through all of this. And I think Monster just went, okay, we know what, bugger it, have it. We'll just do rider sponsorship. So that kind of leads me towards that. And this is again where it's so important to surround yourself with the right people. And that's where I think Martin made his biggest mistake last year, was he had the wrong people kind of giving him advice last year. Oh no, it's Aprilia, let's get out of it. No, and look what happened now. Why get out of it now? Why? And Pecco Bagnaia, I think, if that deal is done, which as far as I know, looks like it is, that he will be Bezzecchi's teammate in Aprilia next year. That's why I don't think we're seeing this Pecco that's throwing his toys out the cotton anymore. He's going, well, whatever happens this year happens. I'm tired of this. I'm going to focus my energy on this Aprilia that I've got coming, rubbing my hands together. So that's the only as you said, that's the only thing that Martin's going to have to try and keep out of his mind, not let it distract him too much, because if he does, it's going to put a massive chink in his armor. If he doesn't and continues on this path, there's no reason why we can't be talking about Jorge Martin bringing the number one plate back to Aprilia and then leaving.
And then back to Yamaha. Wouldn't be the first time he's done that.
Wouldn't be the first time at all. So but anyway, it was a great conversation. It's great to have this positive Martin conversation, because for so long it was just negativity and, the wrong kind of conversations to have about Martin. So it was great to have that conversation. Paul, you spoke about rider of the race for you would be Martin. I couldn't argue with you on that. But where I would put the man who finished in third place as my rider of the race, Giannantonio, and I know he's one of your firm favorites as well, is purely on the fact that he had to deal with the disappointment of the Saturday and losing that sprint to Marc through an error of his own. Had he not made that error, I don't know if Marc was there. Marc still said, I was kind of content with second. I saw an opportunity, I took it, and off I went. To then come back in the Sunday race with everything that was happening, the track coming apart, the heat, the race being reduced, everything. And I know it was Marc's mistake that ultimately gave him the position back. But then to still hold off Marc and go toe-to-toe in many ways with Marc, I would give rider, because as you said, in many ways it was expected of Bez. He had done it for the last three races. Martin is a former world champion. We know Martin, so you kind of expect that. To go head-to-head with Marc and beat him is a big feather under the cap. Not a lot of MotoGP riders can say that. Was it 100% fit, Mark? Was it 100% focus, Mark? We can argue about that all the day. The fact is, Giannantonio went head-to-head with Marc Marquez and beat him on the same machinery or one less, or however you want to look at it. And that's where I take my hat off to Giannantonio again. That's where I would make him rider of the race. My only complaint with Giannantonio, and I've said this many times before, Paul, Digi's got this in his locker. You open it up and Digi's got that performance in his locker. But there's some rounds where he opens his locker and there's just butterflies that come out and it's not there. So again, I need Digi to go to Kota and prove it. Because he proved this weekend he is a front-running MotoGP rider. But why he is not involved in these conversations of going to the factory Ducati and factory Yamaha is because the paddock doesn't take him seriously enough in that light. He's okay, keep Digi there. If we can't get him and him, okay, we'll go for Digi. He's a kind of a safe bet. But this Digi that we saw this weekend has got to be in more of these factory ride conversations.
Yeah, well, he's the exact same Digi we saw 2 years ago when he won in Qatar that he won, where he came out that weekend and said, I'm going to win this. And people were like, right, are you dreaming? And that's exactly, so it just shows when he's 110% committed and focused, he's like you say, his name should be one of the names at the top of the list. But that, and we've said it how many times, you can't have one good weekend and 5 bad weekends. The Bezzeckis, the Martins, the Marc Marquezes, their bad results are Marc Marquez coming fourth on Sunday. That's his bad result. Where Digi, and I love the guy, his bad result could be a 12th. So that's the difference. He needs to string all these weekends together, which we've discussed on numerous occasions. Nice to see that he raced. He didn't get any, what's the right word? He didn't let Mark get into his head. I think he said, I'm racing a MotoGP race regardless of who's around me. And he didn't worry that it was Marc Marquez. I think Mark, in hindsight, maybe is a little bit more circumspect after his penalty against Pedro Acosta last week, the first race. Not saying that was it at all. I don't think Mark had the ability to beat Digi this weekend. Interesting, I think, because of the surface, guys were just at 1% off their best. But all credit to him. And, I love the guy. So I do agree with you, but I still think Martin, from where he's come and time on the Aprilia and all the behind-the-scenes drama, I still think he was 1% better than DJ and deserving the award. I don't know who got it. They didn't put up a result.
No, Bezzecchi got it. Bezzecchi did. Yeah.
And rightfully, when you drill everyone like that. But as we say, Rob, we're not looking at it as what's expected. Like next week, if Mark wins at Kota by 10 seconds, I don't think that's rider of the year. The rider will be the guy who you don't expect to finish first, second, third, fourth, whatever it is, like Pedro Acosta in the first sprint race. So anyway.
John Kutzer brings up a good comment here with DG. There is the silly season started very early in MotoGP, and DG, as I said, isn't mentioned in a lot of these names and teams. He's mentioned in going out the paddock into World Superbikes potentially, and that does seem to be when Digi's able to step it up, when he's fighting for a ride, when it's like all the chips on the table, he's able to do that. Then it kind of, when it's signed, sealed, and delivered, he goes into this kind of ghost mode for a couple of races. As Ollie Motor also said, he just hasn't quite had that consistency. Yeah. But the guy's proven. As we said, this Brazil was going to be kind of a leveling factor. It's going to highlight where, and the guy's proved here, not enough, but surely he's proven to himself enough times to go right. I mean, he absolutely thrashed his teammate Morbidelli, who is, essentially the blue-eye boy to that team, and was Moto2 world champion, and so many things in his favor, and the guy was there. So I don't know. The comment here about Clyde Matthews, Digi can be so inconsistent. It's true, Uncle Rob. High ceiling potential, but results vary so much. Thailand, he was almost anonymous to the top Ducati in the last race. And, it's kind of the exact point that we're getting on. And a lot of people in the comments kind of share the same testament. So let's wait and see. Great performance, Digi. But I'm sure the team have got the same frustrations with him. It's like, okay, well, Digi, how much more proof do you need that you can do this? So, let's see it more often.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's go on to Marc Marquez. Big talking point, Paul. Even though Mark won the sprint race, Marc didn't look comfortable the whole weekend to me. When I first saw those laps, that onboard lap that Simon Crafar did on the BMW that was shared, Bjorn Esmond also did a nice little Insta 360 kind of camera on his, cycling the track or whatever. And I just went, this right, and then like a little bit of a left. And none of those, there was nothing that screamed, this is Marc Marquez territory to me. No really hard braking, get the bike turn corners, no fast. As I said, scale electric. So I looked at this and I went, oh, this. And Ducati were running the tires they don't like. And Ducati just came back, off the back of Thailand where they didn't do well. And I was like, oh, this is not going to be a great weekend for Marc and Ducati at all. Somehow he did. He pulled off the sprint race win. And I think that was more down to the failings of the Aprilias on the soft tire, because Bez and then came out and said they put the medium tire on it, solved the problems that they were having. So the medium tire just clicked on the Aprilias where it didn't click as well on the Ducatis, hence why Digi and Marc were so good in the sprint race. But even in that main race, as you said, whether it was, I can't do my Marc Marquez passes anymore because I don't want to risk a penalty, or the surface, or still his shoulder, or whatever it was, Marc just wasn't happy and he wasn't there. Plus he's also, and this is where credit needs to go to Bezzecchi, Marc doesn't have this comfort zone of thinking, well, I can make these passes and I can afford an odd mistake now. He's dealing with a Bez that is going, and an Aprilia that's going to be challenging a lot more this year. So Marc's off the back of a bad Thailand, not feeling 100%, sitting there going, I've got to pick up points. If I make another move and I get, penalized 30 seconds or 10 seconds, or if I crash, I can't afford it. I cannot afford to have two bad weekends, because then Bez has won this. I'm already 20-something points behind. He's got to hope that Bez and Aprilia make mistakes, and at the moment you can't see those mistakes coming. It's a long season, I know that, but I think Marc's got to play with that. I think the pressure also, Marc's thinking of, I've got to win my 10th title this season. I don't think, with all the talk that Marc said, I'm not going to be racing until 40 like Rossi, and I think Marc wants to get this done and dusted. I don't think he wants to. He wants his 10th title in the pocket and then maybe play another season in MotoGP. What happens. But he can't risk this delaying the 10th world title with the Bezes looking so good, the Martins coming back, other conversations. So he's got a lot on his mind, Marc, and it seemed to play on him this weekend, and hence why we saw Marc Marquez, for me, in 4th place.
Yeah, and we're talking as if he's doomed. But I do agree with your sentiment. But on the other side of the coin, he won the sprint. Mm-hmm. He was in the podium hunt on Sunday. Possibly in his head, he said, listen, this track doesn't suit me. It's a track that when he probably saw the layout, he probably said to himself, well, if I get a top 5, I'm going to be happy. So 4th is even better. And he might have just said, okay, we get out of here, no crash, no injury, no penalty, and we've had a good weekend. So I think that's not his sentiment by any means, but I think that might have just been the thinking in hindsight at the end of the weekend. Okay, we got reasonable points. We got a little win under our belt. Off to America, and let's see if we can, once Marc starts dominating, he's going to get into their heads. While Marc's not dominating, he's not getting in anyone's head.
Yes.
So if he does go to Kota and he's fastest Friday afternoon, Saturday, pole position, sprint race, that's going to change everyone's sentiment about him. Then they're suddenly going to say, oh, maybe there isn't a problem with his shoulder. Maybe the bike isn't as bad as Ducati are making it out to be, or is not as good as the Aprilia. So I think this coming weekend will kind of give us an insight into where Marc really is. He certainly didn't look good this weekend. He didn't look like the aggressive, I'm going to say, win at all costs, even if win means going from 4th to 3rd. So let's see. He just didn't look on it. Another thing I'm going to say, which is, he's one of my favorite riders, but has he got to that point now with all the injuries he's had where he said, I'm only going to take the wins if they come easy. And easy by Marc's means what Bezzecchi's done. Get in the front, pull a second gap and control the gap. I don't know. I can't see that being his mindset, but he's 33 years old. He's had some serious injuries. He didn't have a great end of last year. So that can also start playing on his mind. As much as these guys can spit that out of their thinking, I think you do get to that point where you can't get it out of your head. And we'll see this weekend. I think this weekend realistically will be the weekend. I mean, what happened in Thailand with the rear wheel, that was almost a freak thing. Yes, it was his mistake to hit the curb, but I mean, he'd probably run over that curb 20 times over the weekend. So let's see what happens this weekend. I think we'll get a better gauge in determining where he actually is.
I think the biggest thing is that Marc, knowing the strength now of Bez and Aprilia and Martin and Aprilia and some of the other riders, you're going to have the odd performance from Raul Fernandez, as we saw in Thailand. You got Ogura, who's looking like a better, more round-off MotoGP rider. You got the Firmin Aldeguers, who once they get back into the rhythm are going to be competitive. Alex Marquez, once this whole contract talk and everything, which we'll talk about later, there's a couple of those factors that once they settle, and we always have these away rounds and how riders personally deal with the travel and everything that can be another factor. Once we get back into the European round, things change. But Marc doesn't have the luxury of this, knowing there's a small chink in the armor of a Bez, a Martin. I think that there will always be a chink. We saw it last year with Marc. Never say never. That anything can happen in MotoGP. But we're all looking at the Bez and Aprilia and Martin and Aprilia and going, okay, well, Marc, listen, things aren't going to come as easy this year, and there's got to be less mistakes. You're not going to win a championship like you did last year with 4 rounds to spare. It's not going to happen. It's definitely not going to happen. Even Kota this weekend, you're going, it's Marc's track. As Rob Rot 91, I don't know how to say. Rob Rot 91 says, Marc's made mistakes at Kota before, so it's not as clear as we think it is. We're all saying, wait until we get to Kota, but that's. This is also playing on Marc's mind. He's got to go there, and he does have to perform. He cannot be beaten 3 weekends in a row. We forget Marc wasn't in the conversation the last couple of races at the end of last year when Bezzecchi won. But so far this year, the races that Marc's been in, Bezzecchi's beaten him. Bezzecchi and Aprilia have beaten him. And Marc's not had, the luxury of other Ducatis getting in the way of the Aprilias. Okay, Digi was kind of there this weekend. Alex is not in the races so far. Vermin's only coming back. Pecco's just head's gone. He's probably going to help Aprilia this year. Why not? But it's not as clear cut as we thought. So not a comfortable weekend for Marc. The only positive thing is exactly what we've said, and a couple of people have said in the comments, is even an uncomfortable 90% fit Marc can still go win a sprint race and compete for a podium on tires that aren't suited to the bike. They're going to go to races where they're going to have their favorite Michelin's back, and everything's going to kind of line up. So that's where Marc's strength is, and that's where I'm not ringing the alarm bells by any stretch of the imagination just yet, because we know the animal and the beast that Marc is and that Ducati are. But it is going to. I'm going into this Kota weekend, definitely more intrigued than I have at previous Kota weekends, if you know what I mean.
It also means he's going into the Kota weekend, I think, with even more pressure. Last year when we got to Kota, he had won 2 races and 2 sprint races. Now he's going to Kota, and he crashed there last year, but now he's going to Kota. He's been on the back foot. There's absolutely no doubt about it. So suddenly there's a little bit more pressure, because whether he thinks it or not is irrelevant. The press is going to say, King of Kota has arrived. He has to win. So there's definitely going to be, even if it is just outside pressure, now he's got to deal with that too. So I think this weekend will be, look, it's a fantastic track. It's beautiful to watch. The racing's normally reasonably good. So let's see what happens. But I do think he's got a little bit more added pressure. Marc can deal with the pressure. There's absolutely no doubt. But now the pressure's there because he hasn't won. It's not there because he's won and they expect him to win again. Different kind of pressure.
Absolutely. So let's see what happens this weekend. It's going to be intriguing either way. I just, the conversation's so much better already this year, compared to last year, where it started off with Marc dominating, Alex the first 6-7 races was Marc and Alex. Already we've got, okay, I know it's Bez and Aprilia, and that might become boring, but at least it's something different. At least Marc is now. Marc, we said it so many times last year, Paul, and I think a lot of people said it. Even the biggest Marc Marquez haters, like Oli Moto, would have said it. Marc was winning races at 85%. 90%, and this is where I'm saying I think it's going to be a lot more intriguing, because Marc's going to have to be at 100% more often to get those results this year. 5th place, Ogura. We've spoken about him already. Brilliant. The rookie season's done. Learned a lot. Big crashes last year. Some great results. Some good performances. Some bad performances. Exactly what you would expect from a rookie. Getting better. as the Aprilia exercise gets better, Ogura is getting better. I think he's in the perfect environment with Davide Brivio there and the Trackhouse team. Kudos to them. They went with the Aprilia route at a time when Aprilia wasn't, kind of the name to have, and we're going through the problems that they did. New MotoGP team invested in it, American company. They've come in, made the choice with Ogura, and David Brivio made that choice to bring him in, and seems to be paying off, because another solid performance from Ogura. Only down part is we saw this at the start of last year. Again, it's another case of, right, you've got to consistently produce this before we can really start, screaming at the rooftops.
That's all there is to say, Rob. And once he lost that consistency last year, he started crashing and he got injured. Yes. So as long as he keeps that consistency, I think he'll be good. I really think he's a rider who deserves his ride, but he can't now let it slip and have a big crash and then break an ankle or something silly. So I hope he sticks to whatever he's doing. But exactly like last year, great start, and then it all fell apart. So it's going to be tough for him. He's going to have to really, he's got to, like we've said on numerous occasions with all the riders, you've got to be focused from Friday morning till Sunday afternoon. That one session where your focus is not there throws you out and it causes problems. So I hope he can stick to it, because clearly the bike is capable. So as long as he just sticks to what he's doing, he's a solid rider, and he's always in his Moto2 and his Moto3 career, but specifically the last 2 years in Moto2, the last third of a race, he's fantastic. He's whether he can ride better on worn tires, or he uses the tires less, so he's got more grip. He's very good at that. If he can just factor that in, like he did this past weekend, where he sort of made up 4 or 5 places in the last third and in a shortened race, he'll be very good. So you must just keep that consistency, which is, it's easy for us to say, but he's got such big names behind him that are trying to do exactly the same thing. And that's where that pressure comes from.
Yeah, I just like him. I think he's a very mature rider. You can never see him throw his toys out the cot. You always see him methodical. You see him get back in the pits, sitting, communicating with his team, how he does his his press debriefs and everything. He's just got that quality MotoGP rider feel about him, and I think he's just going to be a long-standing MotoGP rider for many years to come. And he's flying the flag for Japan, so it's great to have him in the championship. 6th place, Alex Marquez. Someone mentioned it earlier about the livery. There's no doubt Gresini win best livery of the round. Absolutely 100%. Beautiful. It looked beautiful on a 500cc Grand Prix bike with Gresini all those years back with Alex Barros. Great to see it. And how fitting was it to go back to Brazil and Gresini still going as competitive as they are and run that livery. It was fantastic, and well done to them. Alex Marquez is a strange conversation at the moment. He hasn't really kicked on yet from a great season last season. He's got the newest spec Ducati, which he wanted. It hasn't quite seemed to gel with it just yet. But all the Ducatis just seem to be that little bit off. The one thing I would say with Alex Marquez is, and we've said it time and time again, Paul, when this contract talk and future talk comes in, it does seem to distract riders. And we know Alex Marquez is talking to KTM. They've offered him stupid money. They've got to replace Pedro Acosta. They need a big fast name to replace Pedro Acosta. Alex Marquez, and I don't think a lot of riders are putting their hands up, to be honest, especially after this weekend again, that Alex Marquez and his representatives would probably be going back and saying, apparently the talk that I've heard is Alex has said yes, but he wants massive money. And why wouldn't you? If you're going to leave the comfort zone of a team that you loved at, on a bike that you love, competing week in, week out for race wins and championships, the only reason why you would leave is money. Each rider will get to that point in their career and go, okay, well, was Alex's real chance at winning a world championship last year? You look at it and you could maybe say, yes, okay, well, I'm getting to that point in my career where let's go make some money. Let's try and be competitive. Let's go to KTM and try and be competitive. Yeah. KTM want to be competitive. Of course, this new era is coming in. That's great. But yeah, I think we've seen it time and time again when these rider negotiations are going on, it seems to play with riders' performances. We see it with Pecco Bagnaia with his Aprilia thing. We've seen it in the past with Martin when his head's all over the place. And I think that's maybe the one thing that's just holding Alex back at the moment. So as soon as he clears that, I think he'll get going again. I think, again, once Ducati get into their comfort zone of having the tires they want and into the European rounds, we'll see a better performance, but certainly a much better conversation than he had at Thailand. And third fastest Ducati, points in the bag, and let's move on to Kota.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do think, in my mind, I would like to know, and you saying throwing big money at it, for him to move from Gresini to the factory KTM, presuming that's where he goes, do you think it is a massive jump in income? Because that would be, as of right now, that would be your only logical reason to do it. But do they do it for the money? I do agree with you. I think under almost no circumstances will Alex ever be a MotoGP world champion. He had his chance last year. We blew his smoke up his butt plenty last year. He did what we said he couldn't do. He showed consistency. This year he's already struggling. Is it the contract talks? Was he of the mindset that last year was the best he could do and he's still got to race? I don't know. His brother's still involved. I just hope that he does get to a point where he goes back to the form he had last year, because he hasn't shown any of that this year so far. Yes, and we're only 2 races in. It might just highlight the fact that when the bike is not better than everyone else, he goes back to, and I'm going to say this with all due respect, to being a mediocre rider. And 6th in MotoGP is certainly not mediocre, but it's going back to being the Alex Marquez of not 2025, but all the other years in MotoGP. I hope he proves me wrong. It will be great for him. Time will tell. So far this year, as you say, 3rd best Ducati, but they're 2 ahead of him. Last year there was only 1 ahead of him, and that was his brother, who's a bit of a phenomenon. So let's see how it pans out. He's definitely going to have to start just being a little bit more focused, up his game, and he knows he can do it. But like we've said with Digi, you can't do it for 1 week and he did it consistently last year. But this year he just hasn't got going yet. Whether it's the same problem Pecco suffered from last year with the bike, who knows? But yeah, I do think once as you say, this was a track that Ducati knew they were going to struggle at because of it's a harder compound tire, the sidewall. Hopefully when they go back to Kota and start getting the tires that suit the Ducati, they'll be better off. Let's have a look and see. But he needs to gel with this bike, which I don't think he's done just yet.
As Francois Coetzee says, KTM does not have money, just CF Motor or Bajaj shares. So, I mean, again, this is just from some good inside information that I have received. So Alex Marquez, we know at Gresini at the moment, doesn't really get paid a massive salary. He brings some money in that, but he's probably earning between 1 and 2 million euro a year type thing. From what I heard is KTM came in at like a between 6 and 8 million euro kind of deal. To try purely, Paul, there's 2 big factors involved, Jazz. Purely KTM need to replace an Acosta. Okay, Alex Marquez had a great season last year. Alex Marquez is a Marquez. He's a Red Bull rider. There's a couple of tie-ins there. Okay, that's the one side. The second side is that Alex might not have a choice, because Ducati need to find space for David Alonso, Fermin Aldeguer, and potentially other riders. If if Bulliga, so could they have got to the point where they went, okay, well, Alex, thanks, you had a great season for us last year, but cool, we want the David Alonsos, and we want, we need the fresh blood. We don't want you. So it's not a case of Alex being able to pick and choose where he wants to go. That might be his only option, and he's looking at it going, well, go for the money. Let me go for the money and see what happens. So there's a couple of those factors, but it is big money. And then the flip side of that is that I heard that Alex wants kind of closer to 10 mil type thing. So these are all the conversations that are happening. It's all kind of thumbsuck at the moment. Please don't quote me on any of it, but that's kind of the conversation that I'm hearing from the inside, which is and it kind of makes sense. It does make sense. In that way, there's also the rumor that came out this weekend of Gresini looking at Honda, because Ducati have upped their prices on their leasing their bikes and all these kind of things. So we'll touch upon that a little bit later. But Alex Marquez, it's going to until it's cast and cement, it's going to be that kind of season, I think, where it's going to be up and down, and then the KTM conversation. I mean, it's a tough one. I mean, we'll get into KTM later. It's a tough one, but I think Alex is for now on the right bike in the right team, and he needs to make hay while the sun shines, to put it in a better term.
Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of KTM, Pedro Acosta in 7th place. Now, we were talking about rider of the race earlier, Paul, and, you were saying Martin, which I can't argue with. I was saying Giannantonio, which, has a valid case as well. Then I look at Pedro Acosta and I go, this guy again, he had no right. He had no right, absolutely no right in being inside that top 10. If you look at the 3 world-class other riders, Brad, Maverick, and Anaya, the last 3 positions on the grid, this is where it just shows you the talent that Pedro Acosta is. And we all know that Pedro, other than Bezzecchi and Marc, is probably the fastest rider in MotoGP at the moment. Francois Couture, Gunther Steiner must just be dreading the fact that he's taken over the scene. Hervé Puncherol is just going, he's just lying on the bed with money, He's like, woohoo! Gunther Steiner's just going, what the hell have I got myself into here? But I look at Pedro Acosta and I look at that. Okay, when I saw him go with a soft tire with the laps reduced, I thought, oh God, geez, that's a big step. But this is, Pedro's just, he's just so good. He really is just so good. He didn't have any right to be up there. And I look at that and I think there's a guy, okay, lost the championship lead. He had no right leading the World Championship after Thailand anyway. But just hats off to Pedro Acosta. He's just he's a warrior. He really is.
And he's shown it time and again. When the chips are down, he gives 110%. And I don't want to say he delivers, because what was he, 7th place? But as you say, compared to the other KTMs, he certainly is, he's carrying the KTM torch. Unfortunately, there's no other way of saying it. And whatever happens with him, and I mean, we know the big rumor is that he's going to be Marc's teammate next year. I think whatever happens, he deserves it. He's shown that he certainly has the talent. The fact that, and we've discussed it, that he hasn't won a feature race. Yes, he won the sprint last race, but he hasn't won a feature race, must be eating him alive. And to finish 7th doesn't give him much opportunity to do that. So, and as we discussed at the beginning of the show, Rob, whatever's happened to the KTM, it seems to be the one bike that's gone a little bit backwards. And I always say maybe everyone else has gone forward in a bigger step. So maybe KTM have gone a little bit forward. We've got no previous data from this weekend, so we could say, okay, but last year in the race they did X amount of laps, or they did this lap time. So this was a new track. Next week at COTA, we'll be able to see, did Pedro Acosta run faster lap times this year, presuming conditions are sunny and not raining, compared to last year? Because then you can see if KTM moved forward and everyone else has just moved forward by a bigger step, which is what worries me. But then we know their top speed has dropped. Now that says something has changed dramatically. Where that was always a known thing, that Brad was going to overtake Five Oaks down the back straight. We had a 1 kilometer straight 4 meters or 6 meters short of 1 kilometer, and Pedro couldn't put that to his advantage. So things are not going, I would say, in the right direction, but we don't know the intricacies. I just think it's going to be another, from the 2 races we've had, it's going to be another challenging season for everyone at KTM.
You look at it, and I know everyone in the comments, and of course us, us diehard Binder fans are going to put our hand up and say from the outside, what looks like what's happening inside is that Pedro's getting all the new parts and getting the support, and you can understand why KTM would do that. So we don't know those intricacies and those details. We don't know if Brad and Pedro Acosta are on the same machine, and if they are, what's different and how different. I do think there are differences. I do think there might be some things. I don't think they're worlds apart, if you know what I mean. I want to use my words as politically correct as I possibly can here, and I don't want to diminish or downgrade anyone. Alex Marquez last year, it was Alex and Ducati performing. You could probably lean more towards the Ducati side. Marc was dominant. Marc, it was 60-40. Marc was 60. Ducati was 40. There's always that kind of a split in. It's slightly more the rider, but also the bike. In this case, Pedro Acosta led the World Championship. He just had KTM with just the name tag to Pedro Acosta. Pedro Acosta finished 7th in this race. He just, dragging the KTM name again. And I think that's the biggest difference. And I'm a diehard Brad and will always be a Brad fan. And I think Brad will be the first one to tell you that Pedro is the difference at the moment. Pedro has that talent. Pedro is that talent. And we are going to see it next year when Pedro Acosta is on a Ducati. And I think that is another reason why Marc wants to get this year over and done with, win that 10th world title, because he knows with a Pedro on that Ducati, he's not dealing with a Pecco that he can maybe get under his skin and show his fragility. Pedro's not going to do that. And I do. It was highlighted again this weekend. When I was watching Pedro there, I went, who does this kid think he is? There's 3 KTMs at the back, the financial troubles of KTM and everything that's going on. And then when he gets overtaken by Alex, and then he still passes Alex again on the brakes, and I'm thinking, but you're going to that front end's going. It has to go. You cannot stop that motorcycle. And Brad's crashing out in 17th place. I mean, I didn't see Brad's crash. I don't know what to say, but
they didn't show it.
No, and then there's Bagnaia and Vinales saying these things, and there's this Pedro Acosta just shoving it on the inside of an Alex Marquez. And I'm going, you know what? The guy's a supreme talent, and I'm very excited to see him on a Ducati, and I hope he does get to pick up a couple of wins this year on a KTM, and just show, because he deserves it. More than anything else, because again, this weekend highlighted how KTM is just letting their riders down, but Pedro deserves it. But I can't wait to see Pedro on a package that he can go show his true potential and challenge for a world title where he belongs.
Yeah, absolutely. And just on that KTM factor, I noticed on the side of the fairing Intervitten as a sponsor.
Yes.
That was always Van der Stratton's sponsor, Mark VDS. Am I not right? So I wonder if that's alleviating a little bit of the financial trouble. The commentary we get, which is Matt Burt, he didn't mention a thing about that. I don't know if you listened to Neil Hodgson, hey?
Yes, I listened to Neil and him.
Did they not mention anything about it? I just noticed that. In fact, I rewound it because I thought, but that's different. So maybe Intervitten are throwing a bit of cash at it, which might help down the line, alleviate some of their stresses and help improve the project. I don't know.
Yeah, I saw it, and I don't think it was Mark VDS. I think it was I always remember Tom Lutey's team running it.
Correct.
Yeah, I can't remember that, but it was always Dominica Goethe and all those. Intact used to run it quite a lot as well. But I also saw that on the Tech 3 Moto 3 bikes. Okay. I noticed it first, and then only in Sunday's race, I think I eventually we didn't see a lot of the KTMs before that, and then on Sunday's race I saw it. So,
and possibly they didn't run it in the practice sessions, like with the Grassini bike, only bringing that livery out for Sunday's race. I don't know. I only noticed it in Sunday's race.
Yes. But anyway, so listen, the KTM conversation's a tough one. Pedro Acosta's kind of just keeping them in the spotlight. But I think it boils down to more KTM letting their riders down than anything. In 8th place, Fermin Aldeguer, Paul, another, you talk about rider of the race again. This guy hasn't sat on a MotoGP bike the whole year, hasn't done one test lap, hasn't done anything, literally recovered from his injury, a week before the round, so fitness was probably down or whatever.
Well, you saw him walking with a walking stick.
Exactly. Whatever, And this guy climbs on a bike, and even from Friday in the wet weather was competitive, qualified quite well, and then goes and finishes inside the top 10 in 8th place. And I know there's arguments that he's on a Ducati, and you still have to ride the thing, and I was very impressed with Fermin Aldeguer. That just shows the quality of the man. That just shows why Ducati want to do everything to hold on to him. That's why this conversation of Grassini potentially going to Honda, could that be to sway Fermin to go there and a big Honda contract coming his way? I don't know, but Fermin Aldeguer for me showed his talent. I still think he's that hot-headed kind of rider that's going to have these amazing races, and then he's going to just have a couple of crashes. I think he's that type of rider. But there's certainly a great rider there, and for me, he showed it again this weekend.
And Rob, what's he? I think he's 22 years old.
Something
give him another 4 years in MotoGP when he gets to kind of Bezzecchi's age, and he's got 6 years worth of experience. This kid's going to be proper. Same with Pedro Acosta. We keep forgetting, because it's his second season, we're thinking, oh no, this guy, should be winning. He's still one step beyond a rookie, and the injury he suffered, and as you say, hasn't ridden a single lap till he gets to Friday morning first free practice. So big ups to him. Look, I've always liked him. He's very talented. I was disappointed his last year in Moto2, where he kind of fell apart a little bit, but he's definitely stepped up in MotoGP, and he's just going to get better and better and better.
Behind him, first of the Hondas in Zarco. I mean, there's not much more to say about Zarco, really. It was kind of a Zarco weekend, a couple of crashes thrown in. I think it was a Zarco kind of Honda weekend, a couple of crashes thrown in. Honda weren't really at the races. We'll talk about Joan Mir a little bit later. You know, he was kind of there, and then just, I mean, 2 DNFs again. But Zarco, you know, I pulled you in with us last weekend, the last episode, but I kind of made the comment, and it's a pretty big statement, and I still stick by it. I don't think we're going to see Zarco in the top 5 this year. I honestly don't, because I just think I think he's still got value in MotoGP. Don't get me wrong, but I think that is kind of going to be the best of Zarco, maybe a 6, but yeah, I think that's where Zarco and Honda realistically are going to be in this ever demanding, you know, ever growing MotoGP paddock.
Yeah, it seems like the Honda progress from last year to this year has kind of stagnated a little bit. Mir was pretty good until he falls off, and I don't know if they mentioned it on your commentary. Our commentary, I think they said he's had 36 race crashes out of 54 events.
Yes.
You know, Rob, that's just, you know, that's unacceptable. There has to be a point where you stop blaming the bike. You know, look at Luca Marini. He finished 1 or 2 points behind Mir in the championship last year. He was consistent. Yeah, so there's no doubt that Mir is a better rider than Marini, but it doesn't help if you're good for 6 laps and then you fall over. So, yeah, I don't know what this Mir story, it bamboozles me. You know, he certainly is a top rider. There's no doubt about that. I mean, he's a previous world champion. But I think something just, does he get to a point where he says, well, I don't care anymore? I don't know. I can't figure this guy out. Surely you get to a point when you've crashed that much, you realize, okay, this is the point and no more. The bike cannot handle it. So just get to that point. He doesn't seem to know where that point is. And that's a finesse thing, I think. And it boils down to the way he's setting his bike up, I think, as well, where Marini doesn't get to that point. It's such a conundrum for me that he just can't string 2 races together. And I mean, he's a top rider. You can understand a guy brand new to MotoGP. So I don't know, Mir to me is an enigma, and I wouldn't be disappointed. I think he's got a contract for next year, but I wouldn't be disappointed if he moved to World Superbikes with Somcat Chantra.
Well, yeah, Paul, I was going to just say, you know, to finish off the Mir conversation is there's big talks that he's going to join Trackhouse, you know, on an Aprilia, because link up with Davide Brivio again, where obviously at Suzuki he won his world title. I agree with you. For me, he hasn't done anywhere near enough since winning that title to keep his name in MotoGP. And, you know, when the rumors were coming out that he was going to stay with Honda even for next year and beyond, I was like, but how is this even? I would take a Marini over Mir all day of the week, you know. So anyway, the talk is now that he's potentially going to go to Trackhouse, which, other than unless Davide Brivio just is literally saying, listen, guys, I know he's had these couple of years and I know he's not showing his worth. Just give him to me. I know how to get the best out of this guy, and I will get. Unless there's that kind of conversation, I don't know how Mir can keep himself in that paddock.
Yeah, me too, Rob. You know, he's had 1 GP win in that year that he won the championship. Does he deserve to get an Aprilia? Because right now the Aprilia is probably the bike that 90% of the riders want to be on, which obviously means Raul Fernandez would probably lose his ride, because I would imagine Trackhouse would be happy to keep Ogura. I don't know, that we'll have to see how that plays out. But yeah, Mir to me, I don't know. Mir, Zarco, Miller, it's time to move on, boys. Time to, you know, let's bring the David Alonso, Holgado, bring those guys in and start bleeding new blood. That's what we need to do.
The frustrating thing for me is, and we'll talk about Brad a bit more later, is that, you know, why aren't we hearing Brad's name involved in this? You know, Brad is a better rider than Mir. You know, looking at results over the last couple of years is what I'm saying. I know Mir's got the world championship. Brad's won more races, you know, and I know people will argue that Mir's the faster rider. Well, he's not. On paper, he's not.
He hasn't proved it. Yeah.
We talk about Brad, and people go on about Brad getting out and he's not good enough. And you're going, okay, well, what about the likes? You know, Brad's outperformed the likes of Mir and a lot of riders, Rins and all these riders. So but get Brad's name's not thrown into like the Trackhouse Aprilia kind of hat and that. That's where the frustrating thing comes in for me, especially with Mir, is that it's just anyway, I don't know. The Mir conversation is going to be one that's going to roll on for a while, I think. 10th place, Raul Fernandez. I think it's going to be that kind of season for Raul. I know there's also links with him going to World Superbikes. Ducati really want him apparently on their factory World Superbike to potentially replace Bulliger. Which is a weird conversation to have after his Thailand performances. But for me, unless he goes and produces a lot more of those Thailand performances, which I think it's going to be a yo-yo season for Raul. I think he's going to perform sometimes when the Aprilia is really on it and the others aren't. And I'm not saying that's necessarily what happened in Thailand, but I am saying that's what happened in Thailand. Is Raul took advantage of the fact that everyone else was kind of off it and the Aprilias were on it. I know he still beat Martin and I, where I do take my hat off to him. But 10th place at a weekend like this, where Aprilia were, performing. Again, I think is another rider that hasn't. If you're talking about riders that have they done enough to stay in MotoGP beyond this 2027, where all these seats are available, Raul's kind of one that I question mark. But as far as I know, he's got a contract for next year again. So let's see what happens there.
Yeah, me personally, he's also one of those riders. He's more down than up, as in up and down. And I don't know. I think he'll be lucky to keep a ride if he doesn't have a contract. If he's already got a contract, well, so be it. I thought the only riders with contracts currently were obviously Bezzecchi, Zarco, Toprak, and Moreira.
Yeah, I thought the same. So, but it seems to be changing week in, week out. So let's see what happens there. Just behind him in 11th place, second of the Hondas, Luca Marini, who again, there's no real talk of him staying with Honda. It looks like he could potentially end up back at VR46 or something like that. I think, again, in terms of where Honda are at the moment, I think Marini is a huge asset to them. Brought it home the weekend again. Didn't throw it down the road. Thailand also was pretty solid. And when you say pretty solid, you got to remember where Honda are. The Honda is a 10th, 11th place motorcycle at the moment. There's going to be the odd performance where they might be better than that, but it's going to be very few and far between. But Marini is that solid bet who brings the bike home, gives you data that you can work with, and that's where his value is.
Yeah, and it might be a better bet if there's no space for him in the factory Honda, put him on Zarco's bike and move Zarco out. At least you're keeping him within the Honda, and he can still be their test rider, development rider on race day, which is what we know he's doing right now. So that to me might be a better option than getting rid of him and keeping a Joan Mir, who I don't think he brings anything to the party. Where we know Marini, if nothing else, he's got, as you've mentioned a million times, he's got that analytical brain that knows how to translate his feelings into words to express to an engineer who can do something about it, where Mir possibly doesn't have that ability, whether it's a breakdown in communication or just some people can't explain themselves, where from what you've said, Marini is definitely one of those people who's analytical and he knows exactly what he's saying and what he wants. So that would be my sentiment. I'd rather see him LCR Honda, and so if they're not keeping him in the factory team, which, as you say, hasn't been discussed and seems highly unlikely.
But again, then you can see the argument of Rossi, he's obviously his half brother, and Ducati possibly wanting him. If we've never really dissected it, but if you look at the dominant years of Ducati, 23 and 24, when that was that unbeatable Ducati, Marini was involved with that development in 23. He was on a Ducati, and they could be looking at this and going, well, we've seen what this guy's done with Honda. Bring him into the R46, get rid of Morbidelli, who at this point in time is not really bringing any kind of value. Giannantonio is bringing that value, but as I said in the previous episode, he just seems to be one of those riders that is dispensable. Teams can just do without him. Whereas Marini's got that value to him, and Gigi Dall'Igna, and they might be looking at this going, you know what, just bring him in and let him just be this development rider for us. So that is Marini's value, and that could be his value to both Ducati and Honda, deciding where they want him. Franco Morbidelli in 12th. I don't know what to say about Frankie Morbidelli. It was kind of a home race for him. He's half Italian, half Brazilian. even when he just doesn't look bothered to me. He just, I know he's got kind of that like rest, kind of relaxed, chilled face. I've said it time and time again, it's a very frustrating rider in debriefs. The only time I really got anything out of him was Silverstone last year. We had that great battle with Marc Marquez, and in his debrief, I was there face to face, and he showed some kind of passion for the sport for the first time. Yeah, this weekend again, I just in 12th place, on a Ducati. Other Ducati, the last of the Ducatis, and Fermin Aldeguer comes back from a hospital bed, climbs on the bike and beats him. I don't know what to say about Frankie anymore, but his MotoGP stock's going down, and I know Oli Moto is a big fan, and I know he's got a decent fan base, and I know he's part of VR46 Academy, but just not doing enough to be in that MotoGP paddock for me at the moment, unfortunately.
Yeah, and because we've got this situation where we've got some great riders who would like to move up from Moto 2, we've got a situation where there are more bums than there are seats. And then you get guys like Frankie Morbidelli, Jack Miller, Mir, as far as we're concerned, who I think are keeping up-and-coming talent from showcasing their talent in the right formula. So, he's definitely a borderline case. But rightly what you say, Rob, his name will get bandied around, and a guy like De Gea, who's been consistently better than him, his name doesn't get bandied around, and he is expendable. So it's a catch-22. Once again, it's that's how life generally works. It can often be a case of who you know, not what you know. So he is tight with Rossi, and that might just be something that sways in his favor. But certainly on his current riding ability and enthusiasm, this should be his last season.
Oli Moto, this is the biggest problem Ducati have got, talking about the rider transfer market in next year, is not having enough bikes to fit all their riders on. Do you want to lose an Aldeguer potentially to a Gresini Honda? There is talks that he will go to VR46, and that's purely a move to be able to accommodate him, because they've taken Pedro Acosta to the factory team. Aldeguer, if you remember when he signed, he was in a way promised a factory ride, so they've got to accommodate him. They've got to accommodate an Alonso coming up. So as you said there's a lot of decisions to be made in the Ducati camp, and it's going to be interesting to see which way they go.
Aldeguer is a Ducati sponsored rider. He's not a Gresini rider. He's a sponsored Ducati rider. So they'll pull the strings to make sure he's got a seat. That's why the big talk is that he's going to go to VR46, because I think that deal with, remember last year there was the talk about them with Uchiog saying, no, we're not going to Aprilia. I think that was put to bed very quickly. So I'm presuming that the Ducati deal with VR46 is signed, sealed, and maybe just not delivered yet. Where Gresini, as much as I think Gresini would like to be on Ducatis, I think that relationship is starting to waver ever so slightly.
You also got to find places for the current guys, the Bastianinis, potentially Vinales. I know he's signed, with the factory KTM, but geez, I mean, really? and Clyde Matthews makes a very good comment here. You look at Tech 3, and we were talking about Gunther Steiner and the poor performance that. How long is he going to put up with that? Again, they could have the possibility of saying, all right, KTM, keep your resources, the factory trucks and the bikes. That's great. Thank you. But we're going to go to the Gresini route. We're going to go for success and results. Gunther Steiner won't have a problem finding sponsors. He goes and leases Ducati. That solves Ducati's problem. Ducati said to Gresini, goodbye, you can go. We'll take this Tech 3. Tried, proven, a team within MotoGP for decades and decades and decades. So these are all the kind of things that could still happen. It's not as clear and cut as, these teams are going to be with these bikes next year. So it's very interesting on the rider front as well as the team front on what bikes are going to be in what livery and in what teams next year. 13th place, Diogo Moreira, the local rookie, a lot on his shoulders. I mean, I don't know with your commentary, but with the TNT commentary as well, is this kid literally had the nation on his shoulders. I mean, he couldn't lead. Eventually they had to get security guards to stand outside of his like little motorhome thing, because fans were just opening the door and walking in, and the guy is held on such a pedestal. Ayrton Senna, replica helmet on such young shoulders, and he took it. He was the fastest and leading Honda rider in the sprint race. 13th in a Sunday MotoGP race that had so much against it with the track conditions and on a bike that's not quite there. There were so many factors thrown at this kid that he should have actually just crashed out. A rookie in those conditions should have just crashed out. But there's a great rider there, Paul. I see a great rider there. I really do. Whether that's a great rider on a Honda I don't know. I think he's certainly has already brought great value to Honda. Whether he continues that, whether he's going to, be in a Costa, a Marc Marquez type rider, where he eventually reaches the point of going, right, my potential outweighs what the bike's offering. I need to get out of here. But there's a great talented rider, but a mature rider I see in there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say that, Rob. He's one thing about him that he definitely has, and he's shown it in the 2 races we've had so far, his mental fortitude. Because like you say, this was a massive weekend for him. He's only into his 2nd race in MotoGP. He should have fallen apart like a cheap watch. He didn't. He held it all together. Joan Mir, who's got way more experience on the Honda, couldn't do that where he did. And he showed last year, halfway through the year, what was he, 60 points behind Gonzalez? And his mental ability kept him in the game. And I think that's what he's showing now, is that he knows how to bring the bike home. 13th is not a great result, but for him, it is a great result. So I think, this kid certainly is the real deal. There's no doubt about it. Like you said, Rob, will the bike allow him to show his true potential? Well, time will tell. If by mid-season, towards the end of this season, he starts running consistently in and around the Luca Marini, Joan Mir pace, that'll show us how good he is, because they've got years of experience in MotoGP and on the Honda. He's brand new. So I think that will be his yardstick, to be in and around where they are. And I take Zarco out of that equation purely because Zarco, I think out of all of them, he's actually the fastest rider. So he should be another 3 or 4 bikes ahead of them, which he doesn't do all the time. But I think Marini, Mir, Moreira, all together, he must get to the point where he's the fastest of the 3. That'll show us what he really is capable of.
Agreed. Matthew Clark, Rob, you don't have to support TNT in the UK. You can get a MotoGP subscription. So Matthew, I actually go between both, to be honest. I like the MotoGP commentators, the Matt Burt and I keep forgetting his name.
Lewis Sotheby.
Lewis Sotheby. I do like them. They have some really cool points. But then on the other hand, I also like the TNT commentators. I like Neil Hodgson's input. I really do. He's sometimes very dry and honest about things, which I really like. So yeah, I kind of cross-pollinate between both, to be honest. There's good pieces to take from both, but yeah, I do have both. So that's, if I'm not liking the one, I can just switch to the other. That's the easiest way of doing it. Paul, behind that, in 14th place, believe it or not, the leading Yamaha with 2 World Championship points, Alex Rins. Now, there's not much to talk about Alex Rins, Paul. He's going through the motions, the final year of his MotoGP career, surely. Where he goes beyond this, I don't know. I potentially see a test rider role. I don't even know if full-time World Superbikes, if there'll be a spot there for him. But, kudos to him, top Yamaha in 14th. Another disappointing weekend, 22 seconds behind the winner, Yamaha. Just never really in it the whole weekend. Fabio Quartararo gave them a shimmer of hope in the sprint race. But other than that, just another disgusting weekend for Yamaha. And Rins in 14th is I don't know what to say, really. I don't know.
Yeah, the whole Yamaha project has been a bit of a disaster. I think everybody, including Yamaha, were hoping that it would be slightly better. And it hasn't been, and Toprak must be pulling his hair out. He signed a contract with a bike that was last year when he signed. Quartararo had some pole positions, and he had raced like with intent. Yes. This year, there seems to be none of that. And I think it's going to be a very difficult year for all of them. Rins and Miller, I think, are just going through the motions to get through there. I do think you'll get the best out of Jack Miller every weekend until he crashes. I don't think he's a Alex Rins who's going to get to a point, and Quartararo 18 months ago where he did give up for a while. One thing I think with Jack, he will give 100%.
Yes,
but giving 100% on a bike that's 85% of everyone else makes your task almost impossible. So, it's a very, very difficult thing. And certainly I think this project has backfired on them a little bit. Whether it's going to benefit them for next year, which is their aim, I hope so. But I think in hindsight, they maybe should have kept the inline 4 and just seen this year out. Difficult one. I don't know why their decision was to change now. I presume it's just to make sure all the runnings of the next year 850 are in play, because they're obviously going to, I know it's different bikes, but I think getting the formation sorted out. That's their sole aim for this year.
Yeah, absolutely. The Quartararo, we'll talk about Quartararo now because, he was in 16th, 2 places behind Rins. Bastianini was in between them. We'll touch upon him now. But just to end off on the Quartararo, his weekends are going to be like that. If he's somehow able to extract something and put a decent qualifying like he did here, and then get a good start to a sprint race or a main race, and he feels like he's there, he'll put up a fight. Like he did in the sprint race. And then there's going to be races like on Sunday where, I got a cock start, I'm nowhere near. And it's kind of been Fabio Quartararo's trait. You've never really seen him fight back from 12th and 40. He's always kind of been that kind of he needs that mental kind of, he needs that carrot there of, I've got a good start, I'm in the pack, now I can go. If he doesn't have that, he just I think and again, I don't want to say it in a disrespectful way, but I think he sits on that bike and goes, well, what for?
Yeah.
Why do I have to stick my neck out for 14th place, like Rins, or maybe 13th if I really stick my neck out? Yeah. What's the difference between 13th and 16th? I know it's a couple of World Championship points, but for Fabio Quartararo, it's nothing. I get paid the same money regardless. I don't get any praise for it or whatever. I got my praise in qualifying and my Saturday sprint race. Everyone knows how cock the Yamaha is. So what am I sticking my neck out for? And that's, I said it in the last episode as well, that's going to be Yamaha's biggest challenge this year. Is they're going to have this revolving door Quartararo of, what mental space are you in, Fabio, before you climb on this bike? We know our bike's cock, but right now we need worker bees. Yeah. We really need worker bees. We really need you to give us that 12 million or 14 million euro that we're paying you. We really need that value. And you're not going to get it from Fabio. You're going to get it, as I said, on Saturday, where you could pull something out. We know the talent. The guy's ridiculously fast. I think going to Honda might be the wrong move for him. I think he needs to somehow get himself on a Ducati. But anyway, that's how it's going to play out. But that is Fabio Quartararo. You're not going to get that dig deep to really help take a project up. He hasn't taken the project. He's been a Yamaha rider for how many years now? Since he lost the world title, what value has there really been? There's been no development value. He hasn't taken the. I know it's a completely new project, but as you said, with Jack Miller, as frustrating as he can be, you're going to get 100%. You're going to get a rider that is going to push 110% every single lap, no matter what. And he's going to come back and he's going to tell it like it, and he's going to try and add that value. Fabio Quartararo's value at the moment is a fast rider that can every now and then give you a little bit of TV coverage like he did on the Saturday.
And I think he's got to a point where, then I fulfilled my contractual obligations. I got you a reasonable qualifying session. They covered me on TV for X amount of time. And I did 5 laps of the sprint race in the top 5 or 6. And then he just fades back. I don't know if that is his mindset, but that's how it certainly comes across. It's, as we say, they might not show Jack, but one thing for sure, he's on it all the time. So that's a difficult one. And we saw it, 18 months ago with Quartararo, where we discussed it. He had that 5, 6, 7 race period where he just was nowhere. Then something switched, whether they gave him a warning or whatever, and then he was back on it again. But he can't afford to do that. And is it right to do that when you're probably the second highest paid MotoGP rider in the world? I don't know. So something needs to change with him. Whether he's interested in that or not, I don't know. And if he has signed with Honda, that'll be the last thing he's worried about. He'll do his Saturday stuff, and that'll be the end of him for the weekend, kind of. And I don't think that's right.
No, that's the frustrating thing with Quartararo now. I mean, I am a fan of Quartararo's and always will be, but it is frustrating. And like Lorenzo, I think it was Lorenzo came out and said, listen, you're paid by Yamaha to do a job. Paul, me and you get paid, or all of us in the comments, you get paid to do a job. We can't just go, well, I don't feel like it. I'm not liking the way this is done. Okay, well, I'm just going to down. You can't down tools. We don't have that luxury. And it seems like Quartararo does have that luxury, unfortunately. And again, I talk about representation and the people you surround yourselves with. If I'm Fabio Quartararo's manager, I'm saying, no, my bad. That's not how you present yourself. You're a professional athlete. You go out there and you give 110%. And, yes, I know you're frustrated, but you can't go out in the media and slag the people that are paying the money, that are giving you the fancy cars and the nice house. There's a professional way of doing this, and that's where there's a balance to it. I understand that. I'm the first one to argue that Brad's sometimes too politically correct. Where I think Pedro Acosta's got a good balance of it, of having the luxury of being able to voice his opinion, but also, in a nice way, a politically correct way. I think, and that's a luxury that some riders have and some don't, where Fabio Quartararo seems to have forgotten that. He's down tools. I think there's going to be races this year where he's going to down tools. I think this weekend is one of them. And Yamaha just have to deal with it. But, Honda have got to look at that and go, well, what are we investing in here? We're not investing in development. We're definitely not. We're investing in a results-based rider like we have with Joan Mir. And where's that got us? Now, I'm not saying that Fabio Quartararo is going to go do a Joan Mir, but I'm not saying he's not. It's a risk. I know Fabio Quartararo's this amazing rider, but Honda, with the big money that they're going to throw at that project as well, they've got to be prepared for. Right, there's times where Fabio Quartararo just downs tools. It's just how he is, and that's also because of his best mate who worked in a surf shop or whatever is his manager. It's maybe the wrong representation, so they've got to deal with it.
Yeah, and also sometimes he comes across as this sense of entitlement.
Spoiled little kid.
Get over yourself. As you said, he's there to do a job. He's one of the best. He's certainly over one lap. He's probably the top 3 fastest riders in the world. Now, just rein in your temperament and string together week after week after week and deal with it. You signed the contract. No matter what promises Yamaha made to him a year and a half ago, he signed the contract. He now needs to commit to that contract week in and week out, because it's disappointing that we're discussing this and we could be 100% wrong. Maybe he is giving 110% every weekend, but it doesn't look like it. And that's what people are discussing. And we won't be the only two or the only show sitting here saying, Quartararo, big cash, no input. We need, bring something to the party. And I don't think he is at the moment for the status. And I have no doubt he's not my favorite rider. But one thing I can say for sure, he certainly has almost, or if not the same amount of talent as everyone in that field. There's no doubt he deserves to be there. But he needs to just show that he actually wants to be there, and that's maybe a little bit of a difference.
Well, that you've hit the nail on the head there, Paul. We just spoke about Jack Miller. He shows that he gives 100. The results aren't there, and he wants to. Fabio doesn't show any kind of commitment. He doesn't. He goes in front of the mic and he just says, "Yamaha, this Yamaha, the box cock. It's not me." And he is right.
Yes, correct.
But you can't say it like you're a spoiled child, and that's the frustration with. And like I said, that's what Honda have got to now look at. It's why didn't Ducati bend over backwards? Why aren't Ducati bending over backwards? You got to look at it like that. I always look at some of these American football movies that I've watched, and I love watching it, where this young quarterback is the next best thing. He's the greatest thing on the planet, and then he gets picked 90th in the draft, and it's because these coaches have done their homework of. This guy was sent the playbook, and at the back of the playbook there was $100. So only players that went through the playbook would know that, and how they are with their teammates and how they celebrated when their teammates had a birthday party, but he wasn't invited. Oh, well, why wasn't he invited? All those kind of little things, and Fabio just seems to have that not going for him at the moment. He just doesn't seem to be a team player at the moment. So. And like you said, it's just hard that we're talking about the guy like this, because there's a MotoGP world champion there and this phenomenal rider. But anyway, just behind him, Top Rack Race Galioglu, there was a comment here. Alex Foljun, Top Rack is seriously regretting his decision to leave Superbike for sure. Yes and no. I think it was his only route into MotoGP. He did whatever he had to do in World Superbikes. He was never going to want to be a Johnny Ray and Mr. World Superbikes. He always made his intent clear. He wanted to get to MotoGP. I think Toprak showed the talent that's there with the performance in the wet and the feeling and again, I know how many riders committed, knowing what was going to happen, but there's a supreme top talent there in Toprak. It's going to showcase itself at some points in the season. I firmly believe as soon as that Yamaha gets better, I think he's going to bring value to the Yamaha project. I think he's being judged way too early, but I think he's looking at this and going, this would have been a lot easier if I was on a Ducati or something, no doubt about it. But, this is the processes of MotoGP. This is the kind of school of hard knocks, the graduation period. And And I still firmly believe in the top rack exercise, and I think that exercise is just going to get better and better and better. Okay, he was the third best Yamaha this weekend, but at Thailand he beat Jack Miller, and he wasn't far away from top rack, from Fabio. And I think that, again, as I said from the start of the season, his yardstick needs to be the Yamaha riders. There's going to be the odd races where, cool, maybe a top 10, maybe miraculously in the wet, as Francois Coetzee or something says, maybe a top 5 or something. But as long as he's beating or close to those Yamaha riders, because if it's exactly the same as Brad's problem now is, cool, yeah, he's the best of the Vinales and the Bastianinis. Okay, not this weekend, but in Thailand. And Pedro's that kind of yardstick ahead. But as long as you keep yourself in that conversation, as long as you're not left behind by the riders on the same bike, then you can still be in that conversation. And I think that's where Top Rack's going to keep himself. And I'm glad he's there, and I expect more things to come from Top Rack.
Yeah, absolutely. And his name has been around for so long, but in a different paddock. And this is a different animal altogether, and he's still adapting and getting used to it. And so he is still a rookie. So I agree with you. We said at the beginning of the year, if Rins is his yardstick, and I think that's where he is. So, and I'm sure by mid-season he's going to be, if not consistently, now and again beating Rins and Jack Miller, and then on the odd occasion, if he can finish near Quartararo, if Quartararo's in the game, I think he'll do well. But I think one thing we'll see with Top Rack is he knows how to ride fast, and he very seldom makes a mistake. And I think that's a big plus in his favor, is that he's going to bring the bike home more consistently than some other rookies have done in the past, and that'll stand him in good stead.
Absolutely, couldn't agree with you more. Let's quickly get on to Bastianini and Vinales. I mean, Bastianini, it's a tough one. Great rider there, but the KTM exercise is just not working for him. It's just the wrong environment, wrong bike. Bastianini has proven that he needs a Cressini environment on a Ducati to go succeed. He doesn't need the pressures of that factory ride or a bike that he can't gel with. I don't know what's going to happen with Bastianini, to be honest. I've heard his name. I haven't really heard much of his name, to be honest. And it's an Italian. It's a strong Italian Moto2 world champion name. I don't know what's going to happen there. But the Vinales conversation is one we can talk about, Paul. Signed up with Jorge Lorenzo, put a lot of work in the preseason. And this is where Vinales is finding out. Lorenzo, I'm sorry to say, is finding out the huge failings of Vinales is when things don't go the way he wants, he cannot recover. On a race weekend, unless he climbs on a motorcycle that is working the way he wants it to work, or is just working in general, Maverick Vinales cannot and will not find answers. And already there's talk of tension between the two. Because I can imagine Lorenzo sitting there saying, shut up. What are you talking about? Get on the thing and ride the thing properly. Stop whining. And Vinales,
look where Pedro is.
Yeah, exactly. And Vinales just doesn't have that same Spanish mentality as the Pedros, the Lorenzos and stuff. So Neil Hodgson gives it another couple of races, and that's going to be over. And I kind of agree with him. There's already talk that's going to happen. But Vinales, talk that he's going to be in the factory team ahead of Brad. I don't see Vinales' worth at the moment to KTM or MotoGP. In fact, I know he's a big name. I know he's a MotoGP contender and race winner. Hasn't been for a long time. I know he had 1 or 2 standout rides last year on the KTM. Okay, well, what does that mean? And he must be kicking himself. He left Aprilia. And this is the kind of mentality that Vinales has. He doesn't have any foresight, it seems. You don't look at that. He wasn't willing to stay there and go, you know what, I'm going to put in the hard work here at Aprilia. He doesn't have that kind of mentality, and I don't see the worth. I honestly don't see the worth.
Yeah, Rob, I think if I read correctly, this is either his 12th or his 13th season in MotoGP. He's won 10 races, which is a fair amount, but he's had some of the best equipment. Like he was on the Yamaha when the Yamaha was about to win consistently, or was consistently top 3, and yet I think he only won 3 times on the Yamaha. So he's definitely a rider that blows hot and cold, but more cold than hot. And I've likened him to Luca Cadalora many times. When he's on it, it's almost impossible to beat. Okay, now he's on a bike that I don't think is capable of winning. So when he's on it, he's not going to win. But he just seems to be, like you say, if he climbs on the bike on Friday and it's not perfect, that's his weekend done. and he's also, I think, more than overstayed his welcome. And it is strange that his name gets bandied about and Brad Binder doesn't. And, when you look at last year and how this year started, Brad's consistently been better than him. So why are we not hearing Brad's name being bandied about? It's a little bit of a concern. Understanding, like we've said, there's more seats looking for, or more bums looking for seats, puts Brad in a very precarious situation. But he shouldn't be in that situation. Maverick should be in that situation. Let's see how it pans out. But you're quite right. Maverick, and then the big rumor is that him and Lorenzo have already divorced. Lorenzo wasn't in Brazil. He's not going to be in the US. So it sounds like that's severed itself all on its own.
It's good news for me because my Spanish mate in Barcelona is good mates with Jorge Lorenzo, and I've sent him 3 helmets that I would love to get signed by Lorenzo, and I couldn't because he's, traveling the world as Vinales' handbag holder. So I hope it does end so he can come home and he can sign my helmet and I can get them back.
And apparently, if Jerez is the first round in Europe, Lorenzo's going back to that, what is it, DZA and DAZN TV channel as a host. He's not going to the race as Mavericks, whatever you would call it.
Coach,
so that's, coach, whatever, So that's something interesting as well.
And I wonder if the teams also had something, because I mentioned in the thing, surely there's value in having a Lorenzo in that team as a Gunther Steiner or someone going through your data, taking a Pedro's data and taking but let's call a spade. Lorenzo's not the most likable person in the world. I think it's very easy to clash with Lorenzo, but there is certain value there. But it's clearly not going to work in that environment with Vinales and everyone else. So, let's see. I think that news is going to come out very soon, or they might just sweep it under the table, to be honest. Probably costing Vinales an arm and a leg and just not getting the value there. So anyway, he was stone last in 18th place. So you talk about top rack and he's not cutting it. He's beat a 10-time MotoGP race winner and a factory Yamaha rider and a factory KTM rider and a second race out. So there we go. Pecco Bagnaia, Paul. I also don't know what to say. Just wasn't there the whole weekend. Thailand wasn't really there. You can see Tardozzi and them just. I think that whole exercise is. I think already last year it ended. I think they had no better option other than to stay together this year, play it out, and then get myself on the factory Aprilia next to Bez and restart my career. Because and the other thing I'm seeing is that friction between Pecco and Valentino Rossi. I'm just sensing it. As I said, in that thing, kind of bypassing Pecco and going straight to Bezzecchi, and then Pecco coming out and saying, there was a little bit of dismissing what Rossi had to say. Rossi said, Mark kind of got under or in the head of Pecco a little bit, and Pecco said, no, he never. What are you talking about? Something. So, I think Pecco's just in this, I don't want to say no man's land, but he's just floating at the moment and can't get the bike to work from him. You can say it's the bike. You can say these people that say it's Mark developing the bike, and I can't stand that conversation because there's Digi performing. There's Fermin Aldeguer performing. There's Alex Marquez performing. Pecco Bagnaia is a 3-time world champion, a 2-time MotoGP world champion. And you're telling me he cannot get the bike to work. Pedro Acosta is going to climb on that bike and make it work straight away. So Pecco's mind is gone. We've said it time and time again, Paul. Pecco's mind is gone. And it's going to be a long, hard season for Pecco.
Yeah, it certainly is. And I do think Mark got into his head. Not initially. Initially, he was trying to match Mark last year. Then he realized he couldn't. His level of what's the right word? His level of competitiveness stopped at Jorge Martin. Then the bar got raised a little bit by Marc Marquez, and I think this year it's been raised a little bit more by Bezzecchi, and I don't think he can deal with that. I think he's hit his ceiling. And I don't think it's just a rider talent ceiling. I think it is also a mental ceiling that he needs to adapt to. Now he's looking and saying, geez, Digi's ahead of me, Ferman's ahead of me, Alex is ahead of me, Mark's ahead of me, which was to be expected. The only Ducati behind him when he stays on the bike is Morbidelli, which is no great shake. So I think he's become mentally fragile. When it was him and Martin at the top of the pile and everything was working, he could dominate. Suddenly that's not happening. There's no doubt when he crashed, they showed David Tardozzi. That relationship is, we said it last year, we thought it had fractured. You just see, Todozzi used to jump up and he was animated. Now he just drops his head and he's like, not okay.
This guy. Yeah.
And there's two, when he jumps up and he's animated, that means he's invested in it. Now it's almost like, oh, geez, he managed to get through 9 laps and then he fell over. So I just think that I agree with you. They're going to try and ride this year out. Hell of a long year to go. Unless he turns it around and, like you say, he's got 4 Ducatis ahead of him. It's going to be very difficult for him. They're all on more or less level playing fields this year. So the Ducati riders, it's going to be a tough year for him. It's really going to be tough. And the one thing that worries me, if he doesn't dig himself out of this hole that he seems to be going deeper and deeper into, by the time if he does go to Aprilia, which looks like a done deal, by the time he gets there, you might find that he's now gone back to 4 years ago speed. He needs to pick it up. And that's going to be difficult too, because he's going to jump on a bike where Bezzecchi's running at the front and he's midfield. Ogura might be beating him if he stays on the Aprilia. It's going to be a real challenge for him. So I like Pecco as a person because I think he's just an honest, down-to-earth, does the best he can. But I'd like to see a little bit of that, a little bit of oomph, if that's the word. Come on, Pecco, get out of this, get on the bike, start, because he seems to be like, hey, I gave it my best and I crashed. Okay. I just want to see a bit of a change in that. It's not focused. They're all super focused, but whatever it is to just get into, you want to give like a little bit of, hey, come on now, bud. So I'd like to see that from him, because if not, he's going to get worse off as opposed to better off, and that's going to really hurt him.
It is, Paul, and I looked at Pecco this weekend, and I looked at the exercise, and what I saw was Pecco is very much Marc's wingman. He's almost, in a vulgar way to say it, Marc's bitch in a way, because what really gave me that testament was sprint race Saturday. And just hear me, I could be completely wrong, but I looked at that decision on sprint race Saturday. Heading onto the grid, teams were like, oh, do we go soft? Is it going to last? Medium is definitely the tire to use for Sunday, but they don't have enough data on it because they haven't, they pretty much went from wet conditions to qualifying where they had to run a soft tire to get a lap time. So, what do we do? So there is Marc and all the guys that are going to be competitive in the sprint race. Soft rear tire.
Soft, yeah.
Pecco Bagnaia, medium rear tire. Yeah. Now, come on. If you are seriously going, no, I'm going after Marc, bugger you. I'm going with those guys. You're going to be on a soft rear tire. Yeah. Now, what I think, to me, it looked like, again, this is from the outside. I look at this and Ducati go, right, Pecco, let's just be honest with each other. Yeah, you're not going to be in here. We need data for Sunday's race. We're putting you on the medium tire. You're going to go collect data for us in this race.
Yeah. Yeah.
And why wouldn't they?
Yeah.
And if Pecco had any fight in him, he would be saying, F off. You can shove that right up your ass. I'm going to challenge these guys. You're putting a soft on my tire. Why go for a medium tire in the sprint race?
Yeah.
When 99%, please do me a favor. Every other Ducati is on a soft. No. So I looked at that, and I'm a huge Pecco fan. I love Pecco. I agree with you fully. Is in modern day MotoGP, you can't have 2 off seasons, and then I hope he's going to climb onto that Aprilia and be competitive. But 2 years of not being competitive, it's going to be a hard stop. But I looked at this weekend and I went, no, Pecco, you've stopped fighting. Even when he crashes now, it's just there's no. Marc would hold that Honda and go, for God's sake, please, or you
pull signs at it. Yeah, correct. Yeah, emotionally invested.
Pecco's just going, okay, put the medium tire on. I won't be competitive in the sprint race. That's fine. Yeah. Come on. I was disappointed with that, but it also showed a sign of where he is in that team, and that they're going to literally use him as this race weekend. Yeah, test ride. Okay, we need info on the medium tire. We're putting you on it.
Yeah. And as we say, Rob, that's going to be challenging for him, but he's kind of dug the hole himself.
Yeah, so, no, yes, he's put himself in that situation because, I don't think people can say, but it's a different bike. And no, Fermin Aldeguer performed better last year on a bike. Yeah, but it's not the same bike. It's a Ducati. I don't care. Giannantonio was competitive this weekend. Fermin Aldeguer climbed out of a hospital and was faster than there's no more excuses. I was one that would find excuses for Pecco because I believed in him so much. I'm struggling to find those excuses anymore, and it's horrible to say, which is what does this Pecco Bagnaia 63 was pissed off because Gigi and Tardozzi said him out to be number 2 without his approval. Now, I know that, but you know, he can still go make himself relevant and number 1 in that team. Just go.
You know, look at Bezzecchi. So he was handed the opportunity. He didn't ride himself into the number 1, but he grabbed the opportunity and he made the best of it. Pecco, he can't say, oh, they made me number 2 without me knowing or without asking me. That he's on the same equipment as you say, not only as Marc Marquez, same as Giannantonio, Alex Marquez, Fermin Aldeguer. So stop making excuses. You're actually the factory rider. Get on the bike and you should be running 1-2 in this championship. And when Marc is 1, 2, 3, 4, you 10, 12, 14, and that's not the same. If Marc was 4th and Pecco was 5th, maybe we wouldn't be having this conversation, but it's not. He's 5 places behind Marc. If that's your benchmark, then you've got to throw in that we've got Fermin, Alex, and Digia on factory bikes, but not the factory team between him and Marc Marquez. So he's going to run out of excuses very soon. Not saying by any means that he's making excuses, but he's going to get to a point where he can't say, "Oh, it's the bike." Marc said it to him last year after they had tried everything in a subtle way. Marc said, "Listen, just ride the damn thing," and I don't know if Pecco has that ability to just overcome hurdles, which a guy like Marc, Pedro Acosta, seems like Bezzecchi, they're figuring ways to make it work for them. Pecco has to start thinking along those lines as opposed to, oh, this doesn't work for me. And I think that's very challenging. Easy for us to sit here and say that, but that's the reality behind it, is that other guys are making it work. Why aren't you?
Yeah. And this comment here from Alex Fillion, Bagnaia's crash looked weird as well, not the usual late front end wheel loss. I almost felt he fell on purpose. And Alex, this is, we had the conversation last year. A lot of Pecco's crashes were like these quick, front end washes. And you look at it and you go, well, how's Marc breaking so deep into the turn, sending Pedro Acosta wide in Thailand or whatever, that whole argument or whatever. And here's Giannantonio shoving it on this weekend and keeping it. Fermin Aldeguer lives on the front end, and this guy's crashing. And I said it last year, and I still stick by it. I looked at that crash again this weekend. I see a stiff rider. I see a rider on that bike that's not accommodating the front. He's adding pressure to the front. He's not riding like that smooth. He looks horribly stiff. He looks horribly uncomfortable. Jack Miller said last year he knows Pecco Bagnaia inside and out. When he rides behind him, he looks stiff and rigid. And that, it's two positives. You're just resisting the bike, and he's forcing unwanted energy onto that motorcycle. And if I look at Marc, his elbows out, and he takes some of that front end stress onto him. And Pedro Acosta does it so well on that KTM, and I think that's the biggest difference between him and the other KTM riders in how he takes the pressure of that, or some of the pressure off the front with his riding style, with the way he positions himself when he enters corners. Those kind of things in modern day MotoGP make the difference, and that's what Pecco hasn't figured out. Yeah. When he didn't have to figure it out, it was easy. There was nothing for him to figure out. A spanner was thrown in the works. He had to figure out something, and he just couldn't figure it out. They got to a point where they put the GP24 forks in the front. They turned that bike inside out for him, and he went and won in Motegi, and cool, I got my bike back. The next weekend, you know what I mean? So it's hard. It's hard to kind of back Pecco up anymore. And I looked at it this weekend, and I was very disappointed with that, because that was a rider that gave up to me. So it's going to be a long, hard season, a very long, hard season for that exercise. Let's end off with Brad Binder, Paul. There's been so many comments. There's a lot of people saying that it's hate, and I agree with Wayne Taylor in many ways. It's very easy to take any kind of attack on Brad as hate, and we don't have to look at it like that. But what you do have to look at is the reality of the situation. Unfortunately, Brad, as soon as he went down in that practice, whatever, where you get yourself into Q1 or Q2, as soon as he went down there, I went, oh God, that's the weekend over, because this Brazil's already all over the place. Very limited time. Everything that's going on, this is just going to be a complete and utter disaster. You need track time here. You need track time. You need confidence. And that was taken away from him with that crash. didn't look comfortable. I talk about Marc not looking comfortable. We didn't see a lot of Brad. It didn't look like a track that suited Brad or the KTM, which made what Pedro did look even better. It just didn't look like something they would do well. Transitioning from left to right, these triple, quadruple apex corners, being on the side of the tire for a long time. It just didn't spell KTM more than Brad. And they just couldn't figure it out. Him and his new crew chief just couldn't figure it out. A bad weekend. I write it off as a bad weekend, but as much of a Brad Binder fan as I am, as I love him and I'll always support him, we've had this conversation too many times, unfortunately. And he was third last, and was the first person to crash out the main race on Sunday. I didn't see the crash. I can't comment on the crash at all, but I'm confident he'll go to Kota this weekend and put up a better display. Remember, he was so competitive there last year, was potentially in the running for a podium before the bike croaked. But Brad and KTM need to bounce back this weekend, and I seriously hope they can, because if they don't, you can't fight these arguments. It's becoming harder and harder to fight these arguments. The one argument I will say is if people want to keep talking about Brad must be out, he's not worth it, he must get out, then so must Bastianini, Vinales, Mir, Morbidelli, Rins. Those are big names. Those are big names, and Brad's ahead a lot of those big names. So there's a lot of other riders that should go before Brad, in my eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. And what a lot of people forget, yes, he had a shocker by his standards last season, and this year hasn't started off great. But we've seen the KTM this season, as we've said, doesn't seem to have progressed like some of the other bikes. But if you exclude 2025, 24, 23, 22, Brad was the top non-Ducati, regardless of where he finished. The only bike that finished ahead of him in those 3 seasons at the end of the championship was a Ducati. So it shows he has the talent. There's absolutely no doubt how good he is. He's just got a package that doesn't, like we say, maybe doesn't do him justice, but we also can't keep making excuses for him because he's our boyki and we'd love to see him just win every single race. He needs to find something, whatever that is, whoever does it, I don't know. Can they do it? Nobody knows. But if nothing else, he needs to be racing in the same positions as Pedro. But we've discussed it, Rob, for the last 3 seasons. Brad's biggest downfall is his qualifying. You have to, Pedro consistently straight into Q2. That's such a benefit because if nothing else, it saves tires. It means you've got options in Q2. You can run 2 soft tires if that's what you need to do to get a top 3 or top 4 or top 5 position. By not getting through, you're down to 1 tire. It means you genuinely can only do 1 proper run because you don't want to risk it. So we've discussed this. Brad knows that. There's absolutely no doubt he knows it. But unfortunately, I don't think that's ever been his strong point, and he would have tried everything in his power to work on that. So let's hope that going forward, that 1 lap pace starts to, because we saw it in Thailand last weekend. He got straight through to Q2. We were all like, yes, this is it. Now it's going to happen. He needs to do that consistently because that, as everybody said, qualifying has become actually more important than the race.
Yeah.
With a bad qualifying, it's so difficult to overtake. So it's a big problem. I don't know how you overcome it. I wouldn't have a clue, but it's a tough one. I think it's going to be a very challenging season. But like you say, he's better than Vinales. He's better than Rins. He's better than Bastianini. He needs to prove that consistently, and hopefully someone will keep him in the paddock because honestly speaking, I think his chances week after week with a weekend like this are diminishing.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. Nick Norris, thank you so much for the comments. Such a power show, Rob. Keep it up. Thank you so much. Matthew Clark. So, Rob Portman, we're doing Silverstone in a tent this year. You're slumming it this year. Matthew?
Not a chance.
No. No. Unfortunately, I've never been a tent person, but I can see the charm in it. I did it at the Isle of Man 2017. I was there for a whole week in the Metzler tent, and it's great. But I'm an hour from Silverstone, so if I don't stay over that side, I just drive there every day. So enjoy the tent. Definitely, I must hook up with you and find you and say hello. You can even give me a guided tour of your tent if you'd like, or I can bring you some samis or help you. But listen, it's just great to be at a MotoGP. So just get yourself there. Let's try and hook up, and it'll be great to see you there, Matthew. And you'll absolutely love it. So, bring it on. I'm excited. Such a hard thing, because I have a love-hate relationship with Silverstone, because it's MotoGP, and then I get to Silverstone and I go, this place is too big, it's too corporate, it's cock. It's not Mugello. I just want to go to Mugello. I want to go to Red Bull Ring. I want to go to Essen. I want to go to those. So it is what it is. But anyway, Paul, as you were saying, I think Danny Holgado in Moto2, it looks like he's definitely signed with KTM Tech 3 or Tech 3 in whatever light you want to look at it, and for good reason. He's done a fantastic job. We talk about David Alonso, and Holgado has consistently hose-piped him, so he looks great. So Brad's worth, it does look like that is Brad's worth, is potentially staying with KTM, but in the Tech 3 fold, which just Brad in MotoGP would be good. We had a comment out earlier of someone asking, if he doesn't, would Brad potentially look at Moto2? I don't think so. I don't know what will happen. Would Brad even look at World Superbikes? I don't know, to be honest. I think Brad's main focus is MotoGP, and that's where it would end. So I honestly don't know, but I do think we'll see him on the grid next year. I do think there's still some great performances to come from Brad this year. I think him and Phil Marin will get it right at a lot of races. Unfortunately, they didn't this weekend. But as you said, Paul, it's that qualifying. That qualifying is the be all and end all of your weekend. Just get that right, and your whole weekend is going to be good. Oli Moto, I'm going to Mugello and Silverstone this year. You bastard. You bastard. You shut your mouth when you talk to me. How do you Mugello?
Give him a long leg penalty, Rob.
Yeah, that's a double long leg penalty, in fact. So anyway, that's where it is. Let's see. Let's hope for a good, as someone said earlier, it can only get better in Kota for Brad than it can.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's hope. Let's keep supporting him. I know it seems like doom and gloom, and it has seemed like for a long time, but there's a guy there that's trying his heart out. Believe you me. And hopefully, after Kota, we will have a one-on-one chat with him. So keep a look at it. It will be confirmed straight after Kota when we will have the one-on-one chat with him. And let's just give him as much support as we can. But enjoy the race weekend this weekend. Kota, can't wait for it. So many things to look forward to. Paul, thank you so much. It's great to have you back. Don't ever leave me again. It's horrible without you, but at least I've got everyone in the comments when I don't have you, and everyone in the comments, again, just fantastic. The support, the comments, the community is just fantastic. It just makes MotoGP even more exciting. So thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll chat to you all next week, Tuesday.
Yeah, thanks, Rob, and thanks to everyone who tuned in. And let's enjoy Kota. Remember, it'll be, I think, late in the evening, South African time. Well worth staying up for. It's definitely one of the better tracks to watch at, especially the Moto3, because there'll be 25 guys drafting for first place. So that'll be a fantastic race. Look forward to it. Yeah, Rob, and we'll chat next Tuesday.
Cool. Cheers, everyone.
Awesome. Cheers, guys.